Who's our guest?
Kyla.
Erudite. Come on,
Okay, got
Pisto. Keep up with the group
shit.
chat. And you would know that.
How you guys doing? How my boys doing? Econo boy,
buddy.
I'm going to be talking to Avi with your trying to defend your honor.
Yeah, Avi, I guess a starter topic to the show. Avi did tell me that I was not worth his time. And I said, well, if I'm not worth, it's kind of weird because he said, we might as well talk about this on voice. And I was like, well, go ahead and DM me. And he said, I don't really think you're worth my time. And I was like, well, Avi, if you don't have to talk to me if you don't want to, there's no obligation. But
I'm going to try
to
set him straight. I think that there's, I don't know, man. I don't know what to say, but we're going to be having
there's some stupidity and idiocy going on. Maybe it's me, he did say
I think
that I was the vile, stupid one. So,
I think he's trying to tailor or calibrate what he's saying, which is not as extreme as how I interpreted the statement. How I interpreted the statement was something approaching like, hey, these Democratic politicians are anti-Semitic or they play footsies with it. And it is a significant reason not to vote for Democrats. I actually think maybe the second part is part of his opinion, but I think he's now calibrating it to the Democrats are more anti-Semitic than Republicans, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah. For those who are curious about this, Dr. Avi is I don't know. I didn't realize he had such a history of online debate. I had only ever seen him go on Destiny's stream a handful of times and pretty much always to talk about Israel-Palestine. But apparently he's got a long history of really just debating all sorts of topics, right? Philosophy, vegan issues. Yeah. I guess he's vegan. I didn't know that. I
don't believe that's true. I believe if someone's vegan, it's kind of like if they do CrossFit, you'll know because they never shut the fuck up about it. So
he has spoken about it a lot. It turns out I didn't know that. Anyway, so basically he was talking about one of his big things is that he voted for Trump, right? And he thinks that it's justifiable to vote for Trump because he thinks that Democrats...
In part.
Well, obviously, overall, it would be justifiable, I think, according to Avi, right? Because obviously he casted vote that way. But his logic is that he is Jewish, and he thinks that Democrats are running cover for Hamas terrorist supporters. And well, give me an example of this. I'm always open to learning. And he did indeed give me an example. And the example was from Ilhan Omar, who I like. Ilhan Omar is one of my goats, I would say. And the quote was that this is the quote that this is his number one best evidence of the Democrats are running cover for terrorism. Okay. It's a quote from Ilhan Omar, and obviously implicitly anti-Semitism and violence against Jews. That's kind of where he grounds it out. And so that's why he votes for Trump. The quote is this from Ilhan Omar: anti-Semitism cannot be tolerated whether you're pro or anti-genocide on this conflict, right? And maybe I've messed up a few words there. So the evidence that Avi has that Ilhan Omar is running cover for anti-Semites and
is to publicly
terrorist
condemn
supporters
anti-Semitism
is a public condemnation of anti-Semitism. Now, I said to him, I was like, look, honestly, I'm really just not seeing the anti-Semitism in the we shouldn't tolerate anti-Semitism, statement. And he said, well, look, by framing it as pro and anti-genocide, you're kind of calling like basically supporters of Israel necessarily genocidal, and that's sort of transitively anti-Semitic. And it's like, Avi, we're 20 layers removed from like the spirit of this statement is Ilhan Omar saying, look, whether you're on their side or you're on the side of the protesters or whatever the scenario is, you shouldn't be anti-Semitic or support anti-Semitism. I think that's a pretty plain reading of what she's saying. And, we kind of debate this a little bit in the comments. He says I'm vile and disgusting and this and that. And he linked it's hard to disagree. And he linked a single source from an organization called Stop Anti-Semitism, which is my understanding is it's founded and funded by a Trump donor Republican. Now, hold on. I'm not saying that's necessarily a reason to discount all of their data. We just got to be transparent. This is a nonprofit. what they essentially did was they took data from the I think there's the ADL, I think, has like an anti-Semitism research center, and they took data from them, which is a bunch of self-reported incidences of I guess allegedly anti-Semitic activity, right? And this broken down into many different categories: speech, vandalism, and violence, I guess directly you could say. And what the data shows is there was a huge spike in anti-Semitism basically after the October 7th attacks, and that when you try to categorize these incidences from far left and far right, you get the far left does way more of the anti-Semitic violence than the far right. And this is his like smoke and gun. He says this is the evidence. You know, there's way more anti-Semitic leftists than there are anti-Semitic Republican or right wingers, I should say. That's why, you know, I'm justified in voting for Trump. But he does say another thing. He says disregard all the speech stuff because he doesn't, you know, he thinks the speech stuff is a little wishy-washy. So if you just look at violent instances, I think it showed 121 violent instances from the far left and about 21 violent instances from the far right. And so according to Avi, and I just find this to be a little bit strange and ridiculous, right? If we were thinking about holistically weighting and kind of understanding the full impact of your vote, he says, because the far left did 100 more instances of anti-Semitic violence, according to the data from this organization, which self-reported data, how much you can trust it, whatever. Because of that, he is 100% justified in voting for Trump and internalizing all of those consequences, right? So whether it's 100,000 people dying from U.S. aid cuts or tens of thousands of Ukrainians from the same thing, you know, or, you know, it's massive tax decreases for the wealthy and transfers of wealth to the wealthy, a complete destruction of our welfare state at home. You know, all the PSCO probably focus on all the democracy impacts and the toxicity for our democratic institutions, all that stuff. Completely 100% reasonable because there were 100 more instances of self-reported violence against Jews from the far left instead of the far right. Okay, yeah, sorry.
I'm gonna push on that accountability. No, I'm gonna push on that with him, I'm saying, because ultimately, you know, we all know where we stand on the voting decision. I think he'll probably say it's overdetermined and that isn't the sole reason, but that it's one of many. Or it's just a cherry on top. But we'll see about that, and we'll have that conversation. I just want to say I do think it is ridiculous, the position that this should be a significant reason to vote for Donald Trump. And I have a lot of reasons for that. But yeah, stay tuned. I think it's going to happen not this weekend, but the following weekend. And yeah, and maybe we'll be able to preserve your. I don't know if you want to have a conversation with him. I don't know why he wouldn't have one with you. Or yeah.
Well, I know why. It's because I'm not worth his time and I am vile. So I think he made that clear.
Well, again, I won't contest you not being vile, and I don't think Pisco would either.
That's fair.
But it's all about the reasons for your vileness. Hutch is going to join us in about 50 minutes. Kyla is MIA. I don't know if she fell asleep or something. So hopefully she'll join whenever she's available. But fellas,
there's a lot to talk about. Yeah.
What's going on? Yeah, it was tough coming up with a title for this because obviously you have finite characters, and it's like I feel like it's just Trump versus the world. It's just Trump versus the world.
Loner Box, he rated us according to the comments. Welcome, Loner Boxians, to the Live and Learn episode.
Boxes.
Box loners.
What is the like the demonym or whatever for Loner Box fans?
I like Boxian.
Quadrilaterals, loner quadrilaterals.
Remember the box ghost from Danny Phantom, or is that before your time or after your time? Sorry, Josiah.
Danny Phantom.
Yeah,
listen,
you don't know it. You're not one of us. He's not like us. He's not like us. No, you're not like us.
All right, simmer down. I almost said Drake, but it's the other guy.
Yeah, the other guy.
Fuck.
Kendrick.
No, shut up. I was gonna get it. Kendrick Lamar. He was at the Super Bowl. He did the halftime show. Yeah. So listen, when I was a kid, I did not watch a lot of cartoons. Okay, I watched Boy Meets World.
When I was a boy. This is your tragic backstory.
Listen, there's nothing tragic about this backstory. They didn't let me
watch cartoons.
This is not. No, it was not about letting. It was I had too sophisticated a palate for such childish stuff. Kyla, can you hear us?
Kyla,
she's working on it, I'm sure.
So I watched a lot of Boy Meets World, a lot of The Practice, Boston Legal.
Fresh Prince.
I did watch Fresh Prince. That was good. So I've never seen a single episode of Rugrats, Nickelodeon.
What?
Yeah, I didn't ever watch
What about All Grown Up? Yeah, you watched
nope.
All Grown Up
I
because
didn't
you were
watch
such a grown-up boy.
I didn't watch Recess. I did not watch SpongeBob. I've never seen a full episode of SpongeBob.
Are you
Drake and
serious?
Josh?
I swear to God. Yeah. That was it. I was basically a Disney kid, and it was
Simon's just a little bit older than us. You know, we got to keep that in mind. A little bit older, just a little bit. But the general,
I
Kyla,
was
we hear you.
born in 50.
Wait,
Kyla, can you hear us?
You can hear me now?
It's really, really like far away.
we can hear you, but we
That's-
can't see you.
Weird.
Check the audio inputs.
The audio input is my sure, but if I
Are
say
you
far
sure?
away- I got him. It should be. Hold on.
Now it's a
You guys
little better, but
typically-
it's a little staticky.
Okay, question. Do you guys typically do stream on OBS? I feel like they're polling competitively right now.
Were you streaming before this?
Yeah.
That's why. I did not know that.
Is that the
Okay.
issue? Yeah, I wanted to let the audience trickle in so that when I jumped in, it was. You guys were
Yeah.
live, but now
I
it's-
think it'll still work, Josiah.
I'm
It's the issue. Do you want me
I
to turn?
didn't-
This is what you do. This is what you do, Kyle. And this is what I think you do. And you tell me if this is right, Josiah. You do a kind of window capture of your browser. You full screen the browser, and you turn the video on.
Are you giving me OBS steps right now?
Yeah.
I don't need OBS steps. I need to figure
Okay.
out. So right now, the camera that I'm going to be using for this is deactivated on OBS entirely, and the mic system is sharing. And I've never had an issue with the mic system sharing between like a restream, like StreamYard, but it seems like it's having an issue.
It sounds a little better now.
Yeah, I mean,
that
we
has
sound-
changed.
sounds
Yeah,
good
your
now.
mic sounds good. At this point, we just can't see you. That's it.
Yeah. So let me just try deactivating. I might just delete this mic source. That might solve our problem.
Pisco, I hope you're fucking happy, man. I swear to God.
I hope you're happy. I hope you're happy now. Do you know that reference, Josiah?
I don't know that. Is that?
Okay.
Is
So you
that
haven't
a-
seen SpongeBob. You haven't seen Wicked. You haven't
No, I
seen
saw.
any
I
Drake
saw.
and
I
Josh.
saw the
Come on.
the movie that just came out, part 1.
Okay, well, I just sang from it and you didn't recognize it. And so what good was you seeing the movie?
Could you sing it one more time?
I hope you're happy.
I'm
No,
gonna
you just want me to sing now.
Give me one second.
I don't know if that's not like the right like cadence and tone, is it? Like you're not doing it.
Yeah, it's Defying Gravity, the most famous of all songs.
Oh well, then sing the fucking chorus, man. I only saw it the one time. God damn! Like I'm not
Something
some
has
sort of wicked expert.
changed within me. Something is not the same. I'm through of playing. I don't know the words.
Oh, you don't know what you're
By
doing? Yeah,
The
fuck you.
rules of someone else's game. I think that's it.
Oh, karaoke
What's
night
wrong,
on
buddy?
Live and
Yeah.
Learn.
Oh, people were singing Wicked at this karaoke thing I was at. It was pretty
You
cool.
were at a karaoke thing?
I technically I was, and
What do you mean
technically I sang.
technically?
No? Is it working?
Whoa!
Hey! Hey, we did it.
Let's
Okay.
I'm gonna try to angle this better. There we go. Okay.
Josiah always likes to be on the left. It's like a power play for
Well,
him.
no, it's like because like I'm usually like facing like this way, so like just like Kyla's kind of facing that way too. The Boy's the
this
only
is
one
your
kind of
show.
staring straight ahead.
You do whatever
Straight
you
ahead.
want.
All right. You got to be straight ahead, guys. Well, what was the big news of the week, boys? And Kyla, I should say. I'm a little
We
bit
should've-
toxically masculine for assuming it was only boys on the show.
Yeah.
And we never introduced the guest
Woman on the
ever.
show yet?
I mean, I don't
had a
know.
crystal ball.
Erudite doesn't need an intro. Everyone knows Erudite. I mean, who the hell in our audience isn't going to know who Erudite is?
Most of my
Plus,
audience are
Josiah's
older
audience
people.
doesn't.
Yeah, I was about to say most of my audience is they skew on the older, the more seasoned side of things. So
They're booming out.
yeah, why don't you go ahead
Okay.
and introduce yourself, Kyla?
Sure. Hello, my name is Kyla. You can also find me online as NotSoErudite everywhere. I am a streamer and a horse owner,
An equestrian, one might say.
bait haver, liberal woman, the rare breed.
Was that a
Interesting.
horse
Okay.
pun when you just said breed?
I think more than horses breed, in fairness, and
Oh, okay.
half-breeds.
Well, very erudite, as you can tell. Listen, this is going to be kind of incomplete because Hutch won't join us till later, but you're getting, I guess, the best parts of Live and Learn right now. So
That's right.
there's been a lot
That's
going
crazy.
on.
He invited me, and he's no-showing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think once he said that you agreed, he was like, "Fuck." I was hoping she'd say no, and then he dipped. So, yeah. So
check your cables real quick, Kyla. I think there's a little bit of static that people are complaining about a little bit. But
Okay.
other than that, like what?
Well,
JMax says, or JMC says, Kyla, you killed it on whatever.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks, J-Max.
Is that was this like an Andrew Wilson debate?
Well, that's I think a first piece of news.
Sordid, sad proteges, Jay Dyer and Jim Bob.
Jay Dyer. Oh, so it's a 2v1?
Dyer is as smart as Andrew Wilson with none of the charm, and Jim Bob is all the charm and none of the smarts. That's kind of how I say it.
I see. Okay.
I
Jay
met
Dyer's
Andrew
like
Wilson
an old
once.
presuppositional debater.
Yes, he is. He loves that shit.
I met Andrew Wilson once, and I've never it was a pleasant interaction enough, but charm. I don't know if I'd use that word to describe him. So
He's funny.
that's,
He's funny, right? He's got like some level of like social funniness. He's got timing down. Like, yeah,
okay.
people enjoy a lot.
You know what he hasn't got? The balls to step into the ring with Wick. Okay, I talked to Wick a couple of days ago on his
what?
stream.
I thought you
gotta-
said that
look,
they were
I-
supposed to box.
Look, I'm sorry. I've got to bring this up. We got to have a public pressure. You're not getting out of this one, Andrew. Okay, Andrew offered 20 grand.
Lost.
No, hold on.
Brutal. That would be brutal if you lost to Wick, because Wick is much shorter than him.
Wick offered, no, I'm sorry, not Wick. Andrew offered 20 grand for Wick to step into the ring for 3 rounds. Wick accepted, proposed a date. I asked Wick for an update yesterday. I said,
Contract.
what's an update? Wick says, I have not heard back from Andrew since proposing a date. We can't let him get away with it. Okay? He offered 20 grand to box Wick. He either needs to, hold on 1 second, Pisco, before your lawyer bullshit ruins everything, okay? He either needs to publicly say he does not, he no longer wishes to offer the 20 grand to have the boxing match, or he needs to accept, okay? He can't just wither away from this, all right? I need to see a politics influencer
Maybe
boxing
he's putting the
match.
funds together. Have you thought about that? Maybe like there's some sort of like action film sequence going on behind the scenes where he's like dealing with shady characters to try to cobble together the funds.
It's Jargate.
Look,
It's
maybe
the,
that's true, but he needs to be transparent with the process. That's all I'm saying.
He threatened to box. Not threatened. He asked Nick to box him, my husband, like a year and a half ago. Like, and
I
it was
wouldn't
like
wanna box Nick.
God.
coordinating all the plans and
Cringe.
stuff. And then it's just like never happened. And so it's fair that like possibly just the people who were, I think it was with Keemstar, that it just like fell apart or whatever. But yeah, he like never really followed up with it. And Nick was like, fuck
You
yeah.
greased it. You greased it, dude. Why'd you grease it?
And Nick's short.
Dude, how cringe is
dare you,
it?
Nick.
How cringe is it to like be challenging all these guys to fights? And then to did you see this, by the way, Kyla? Did you see when he said that men are more attractive than women? Just be gay.
This is the issue, okay? When you're a trad man and you hate women and you clearly don't like spending time with them, just be gay. You clearly want to be gay.
He hates women. Yeah.
Isn't he married?
Hold on. Has Andrew ever said he hates women, guys?
That's true.
Wait, isn't he married?
True.
In all seriousness, isn't he married with kids?
He is married. I think he has a couple of, you could say natural children. I think he's got a couple of stepkids as well, if I'm not mistaken.
He's a stepdad and he's got his own kids, right? Like it's just very odd to like hate feminine energy so much and then also be like super tratty. Like it's just very odd. Like you should probably like your wife and her social energy.
Historically, it seems like those things go together, really, being traddy and also hating women. No offense to all the trads out there, but it does seem to be a strong correlation between the two.
That's true.
What are you talking about? Nick Fuentes, Myron Gaines. Oh wait, let me. Wait, is Myron Gaines still around? He was supposed to come to the Tim Pool thing where I debated, but I think he's an ex-ICE agent, right?
Homeland Security.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was Homeland.
Yeah, but ICE is under, isn't it under the
I wonder-
province of Homeland
Yeah.
Security? Yeah.
It is, yeah. I wonder what those households are like. If you like spend all your days being like a I don't know, a brown shirt for the Trump administration. What must it be like to come back to your house after that?
Myron was interesting so he was at the Tim Pool thing when Luke Beasley and I did. It was Luke Beasley and I versus Tim, Andrew, and Myron. And Myron was the one who I suppose surprised me the most because he had some really reprehensible views on stream, but then off stream he was very personable, very it was the dissonance there. He spewed the most unhinged shit on camera. But then afterwards, he was to Luke and he was like, "Hey man, if you're ever in Miami, let's have a conversation." But super, it was very jarring. It was oh my god,
Yeah.
Whereas Andrew was pretty hostile, especially to Luke, and he and Luke went back and forth during the conversation. And off camera, he was not hostile, but there wasn't a lot of dissonance. He was still really guarded, when he was greeting us and then when we left, but there was a huge range between Myron on camera and Myron off camera. It was very, very unusual.
he's very friendly and personable. I will say off camera, I've gotten sushi with Myron, way back in the day, and not just me and him alone, but me and a couple of other people. He's got pretty reprehensible views. They're consistent at least. It's not his views change. We were getting sushi and he's like, "So, what do you think about the Jews?" And I was like, "Nope, not going there with you. I'm good." I was like, "I feel fine with them ontologically."
Yeah, they offered I think Tim and Andrew and Myron, they were going to grab something to eat, but I had to catch a flight, and Tim's compound is 2 hours or 3 hours from the airport or whatever. So yeah, what'd you say?
I'll be there. I'm going Friday.
Hey,
wow.
What's going on Friday? What's popping Friday?
It took a while for us to decide. Do you guys know American Nacho? You guys ever heard of that person?
Yes. He's a groiper now.
Oh, is he?
Looks like
I don't know him. I'm not familiar, but I'll be talking to him about why men are not voting blue.
Okay. I'm sure he'll have sane takes, and it'll be very reasonable, as all discussions on Tim Pool are. I feel like are we all Tim Pool alumni at this point? Because Erudite, you've been on before, haven't you?
No, this is my first time.
No, okay, first time. Okay.
Because I stopped making content for so long.
Whatever. You're back now. Okay, that's all that matters.
Diving in the deep end, aren't you?
Yeah, I kind of restarted with the Jay Dyer debate, and then have been trying to be more consistent since then.
Can I ask you a question, Kyla? How did it feel when you got that one guy when you got him on the branches of government? how were you feeling internally at that moment? I have to
wait. What happened? Because I didn't see it. Set it up for us.
Yeah, set it up.
So I've been debating Jim Bob about patriarchy, feminism, enforcement arm for months at this point. I think we've debated about it 3 times together. And we were talking about the right to vote and just elements about voting and stuff. And he kept on doing little gotchas, being like, "Well, do you know what this is?" Because they kept on just being define words and then fighting me about defining the words. And then I said, "Okay, Jim Bob, come on. Do you know what the 3 branches of the government are?" Because I assumed he would. I'm not going to lie. I assumed he would. And then he didn't know them. And I was like, oh, fuck.
Did you sense weakness and press it?
He definitely
He's like a tiger ready to pounce.
He was like, executive, finish it for me. And I was like, judicial,
legislative.
And he was like, anyways. And he moved on. And I was just like, it's kind of crazy that you're talking to me about voting and right to vote and citizenship when you don't know the branches of your own government. It's a little, again, you don't have to memorize things. I don't know. It's this weird mixture where I feel like I'm betraying the art of what good debate is. Because the reality is he could be having a brain fart that's legitimate and still have good arguments about the conversation. But this is the 3rd time. I didn't clip the other times, but this is the 3rd time with Jim Bob where I've been
just to be Erudite's being way too charitable. I would have to have undergone brain damage to forget the 3 branches of government. No offense to that guy or whatever, but I don't know. I think it is fair play because look, if you're going to come out and talk about in general sort of civic responsibility and these differences between the sexes and stuff like that. Look, I mean, this almost reminds me of those old school IQ debates where gropers would be black people have lower IQs, so we should strip them of their citizenship and or send them back to Africa. But then the natural response is well, but shouldn't we just do that with anybody with a low IQ? What's the race component of this that's necessary in your argument here, right? And similarly, it's like, oh, like we should strip women's rights because of a general understanding of responsibility or this and that. Like Andrew makes the argument that Andrew literally makes the argument that like men should have more rights because women are the weaker sex, like they're just not as strong as men.
And then
It's like, well, what about the
jar and needs the scrolls?
right? It's like, well, there's some
my
women.
argument is that you need the men too, the young able-bodied men. We all do. Like,
yeah, it's like, well, there's weak men and there's strong women. Like, wouldn't if it's really just a strength-based argument, like wouldn't like strength be the delineator here, not gender, right? It all seems very silly.
I thought we like left like early naturalist arguments back to like early Greeks. Like you remember in like early Greek philosophy when it shifted from like mythos to like naturalism. I think it was like Thucydides or whatever that made the might is right. Like essentially like hawks have to
I don't
eat
remember
sparrows.
that, Kyla. You're gonna have to explain it to me like I don't remember it.
You have to remember that we were educated in America and you in Canada. So what's this ancient Greece you're referring
I'm not
to?
citing the guy who wrote it, to be clear, because I'm like,
What's this ancient Greece you talking about?
it's essentially
I've
the
seen
origin of
Troy.
might is right. It's the origin of the transition. So before philosophy was naturalist, it was mythological. So like we believed that like if you danced enough, the sun would stop being eaten by a dragon, right? And then we moved to a naturalist argument. And so one of the first naturalist arguments is might makes right. So the argument would be like, the lion eats the gazelle. The lion's more powerful than the gazelle. What do we want to do? Tell the lion not to eat the gazelle? So essentially, conquerors can do whatever they want because they're the conquerors. Problem?
You know-
and then we went, there is a problem with that. Actually, there is a problem with that.
Yeah, for all the reasons like Econoboy laid out, but it's interesting. You said the word dragon. Of course, my reference immediately goes to Jordan Peterson. And did you see his Jubilee appearance? What'd you think?
I was about to go there.
Somebody
yeah.
who used
You're
to
a JP
respect
fan.
Dr. Peterson.
Cringe.
Yeah.
Cringe as hell.
JP's second book was like instrumental for saving my marriage when we were separated. Like it really helped. I used to say this like 2 years ago. But after his like coma stint with like long COVID and going to Serbia and all that shit, every time I've listened to him since then, it feels like listening to your uncle who went to Vietnam and something like maybe he did weed or something, but something's changed. And now every conversation goes back to like, he's like, yeah, but those like commie Asian people. And you're like, no, uncle, stop. Like we're talking about Turkey, like chill. I feel like that was Peterson, except it was like the post-liberal neo-Marxist blah, blah, blah shit. It was super sad to be like, wow, is this elder abuse yet? Like at what point do we look at this and go, stand down. Somebody needs to stop squeezing him for money. It's a little not good.
I'm sure
It
you've
was
seen
rough.
his decline over the course of years, months, if not years. But were you surprised at how poorly he did on Jubilee? Because I honestly, I was surprised. Like he's obviously a shadow of what he once was, during like the Kathy Newman interview. I mean, it's almost like night and day, Jekyll and Hyde. But even I was stunned at like Parker and all the other ones just running laps around him.
Have you watched any? So I haven't watched his content since 2019 probably, and then I've had an influx of gripers in my server after the Jay Dyer and etc. debate. Not that I'm saying Jay Dyer's a griper, but I was debating with one of them and they're like, Jordan Peterson's the same as he always was, and I was like, no, he's not. Like he's got crazy now. Like he's not the same. And so I actually
Something has
watched,
changed.
yeah, so I watched some of his recent content and I was like, oh boy, like it's bad. And so seeing him on that is exactly like he's just really bitter. I think he was good faith until he got fed up with all the youngins just being petulant and rude. And then he just like wouldn't engage. It was just crazy to watch.
He's
It was
become a bad faith
unexpected.
caricature of himself.
It's sad. It's sad to see.
He is the straw man Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. He's like
Up
broken.
yours, woke moralist.
We'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see who gets who, or whatever he said. Yeah.
Oh,
The
So
dragon.
are we gonna go over the news, Josiah?
Yeah. So let's talk about this. Okay. I don't even know where to begin. Like I said, trying to come up with a title for this shit because there's so much going on. First things first, Pisco. I heard that the Trump administration is actually going to comply with one judicial order in terms of returning an immigrant that was sent to not El Salvador, Guatemala. Have you heard about this?
So no, is this a Mexican?
I don't know.
Who was like,
tell us about it.
so I'm gonna give you guys a little secret. I am in a different time zone right now, and I might have missed it.
Ooh.
If the news came out just today.
Yeah. Let me Google this. I assume
Is it
for some
tomorrow
reason, like,
for you right now? The future
Tomorrow,
hasn't
man,
happened to
yeah.
you yet? Okay.
yeah. Okay.
yeah,
So,
so-
let me bring this up real quick. Let me share the screen.
You didn't check your
here.
ground news?
Order to El Salvador.
No, I don't
Some, like
have ground
Senator
news,
Chris Van
actually,
Hollen,
believe it or
flew
not.
there to
I
meet
went straight
with
to
him, as
Fox.
you recall. And now they're shifting the focus of
Let's
the
see here.
resistance to
So
court
Trump
due
administration
process.
working to
Jeff
fly back
Berger,
Guatemala
got the
migrant
following
We can hear the
live
video.
on the Hill
U.S.
today,
Just
Jeff.
saying.
Nice to see
Yeah,
you.
we're,
Good
we're
morning.
hearing the video.
All right. What about now?
Nope, you're good.
Now we're good.
Good. Justice Department tells court they're arranging charter flight after federal judge's order last week. Pisco, are you sitting down? The Trump administration is actually complying with a fucking federal court order. How do you feel about this?
Wow. Yeah, so this is good news. I think that we need to one of the things that we need to understand is when we're like taking wins and when the administration is moving too slow to get their authoritarian dreams. And anytime we are bogging them down in court filings and they're complying with preliminary orders and they're respecting the jurisdiction of the courts, that is for me a complete win. I think that the administration is realizing the limits of its own strength at times, and they saw the kind of news coverage that occurred with someone like Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Now, recall who was telling you in those days, hey, don't focus on this, guys. Focus on the tariffs. Just keep focusing on the tariffs. You have to realize
Gavin
that
Newsom.
Gavin Newsom, Chris Saleza, all these other people who just want to look at the polls and follow the polls and try to have everything before they announce any kind of statement or any kind of policy. They want to focus group test it, all that shit. And it turns out actually that public pressure can be effective. Now, don't count your chickens before they hatch. Just because they're complying with this order doesn't mean that they're broadly not still going to try to undermine the courts, and they're not still trying to play fast and loose. And it could be the case that they chartered a plane but have no intention of pressuring anybody, or in this case it's just in Guatemala.
What
and
makes
not in
you
Secot, and so yeah.
Well, I'm curious. The first question I have is why now? Even the Fox article notes the update is significant and marks the first known instance that the Trump administration appears to be complying with a federal court's order to return to the U.S. a migrant who was deported in what the administration officials have acknowledged to be a result of erroneous information. Again, that's a hell of a concession for even Fox to make. Why this?
Yeah,
Care
no,
to speculate?
I think that without knowing the case, the guy looks familiar, and so I'm at disadvantage because I haven't seen the filing. But I think if he's been deported to Guatemala, he's probably just in the country and not in Secot itself. And that probably means that what Pam Bondi said at the press conference with that infamous press conference with Bukele is that we'll get a plane, right? So she did say that they would do that in that infamous press conference. So it could be the case.
And he was deported to Mexico. Sorry, real quick. He was so he's Guatemalan and he was deported to Mexico.
Right. So in Mexico, he's probably free, right? He's not in a dungeon. And so that distinguishes this from the people the innocent people, a lot of them, who were wrongfully deported to Secot, in that he has this freedom of liberty. And at this point, the administration said they would charter a plane for Kilmar Abrego Garcia and for these kinds of people. So the main goal of someone like Kilmar, and the reason why the Supreme Court phrased it released from custody in El Salvador, is because once Kilmar Abrego Garcia and other similarly situated people are free from custody, now they can just go and present themselves at a border, or the government has a lot less standing to say, for example, we can't purchase a plane or we can't facilitate a plane. It's not a matter of this kind of international relations where they can hide in that ambiguity. So that, I think, is one thing that distinguishes this case, but it is a good sign.
I'm curious, Kyla, as someone else who is an immigrant, are you surprised by the aggressive posture of the Trump administration now that they're in power? What all the cases that you've heard about the crackdowns on migrants, the black bagging of migrants, the unlawful deportation of migrants, the lack of due process? Because I imagine to a lot of people, if you had said 6 months ago that the Trump administration would be doing what they're doing now, they would have been like, this is like liberal, fear mongering. There's no way they'd go this far.
Well, they said the tariffs wouldn't happen, right? They were like, he's lying about the tariffs because he didn't really get that much done that he promised in 2016. But I think a lot of people fail to remember that the Congress was not nearly as strongly in his favor in 2016. So he got blocked constantly. And so it's tough because Trump is such a loose cannon, right? Like even things that you think he would go for because it seems to be part of his like motif of like America great again, he'll just be like, no, this person upset my feelings, so now I don't like them anymore, right? Like his sudden warmth to Canada after being so antagonistic with us, just because Mark Carney said the right things and was like, you're a great guy,
Carney?
Trump.
Did you just
Brilliant.
mess up your own prime minister? It's
What?
Carney. Come on, you know that.
I said Carney, didn't I?
You said Carney.
That's what she said.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah, I think you're
Nah,
trying to
fucked up.
gaslight her, Pisco.
My
Did I
bad,
say
my
I
bad,
feel
my
like
bad,
you
my
fucking
bad.
piece of shit.
Did I say Carney?
My bad.
I'm gonna
Don't
call
let him
heard
gaslight
Carney.
you, Kyla. Don't let him listen.
This is why it's
don't-
hard to get women on the show, Pisco.
Don't let him Don't let him maple splain to you, okay? So
I should call him like Michelangelo Carminigus or something. I don't know.
there's too many
Did
syllables
you
for Trump.
see? Did you see? By the way, just real quick, Kyla, while I have you on this subject, did you see the Golden Dome stuff with Canada, where Trump is like saying that
saw
there's
that.
deals ready with Canada to be part of this Golden Dome defense? How are things? Do you talked to Canadians? How are the relations between regular Canadians and the Trump administration? Sorry, you can finish your answer. I was just
Sorry, I'm
And what do
so
you mean
so
by
little bit
regular
scared.
Canadians,
okay, chat.
asshole?
I'm sorry. Apparently, I did say Carmi. I meant to say Carney. So thank you. Jumping out my throat. Yeah, this is why people don't want to come on here. Jesus, no word slips at all. Okay, re-ask your question. I didn't hear any of it. I was distracted.
Yeah, no worries. So, speaking of Carney, I'm just wondering if you saw there was like this tweet from Trump, like the Golden Defense, the Golden Dome that we want to
Bro,
buy, and Canada's
Did you
gonna.
see?
Yeah.
Did you
So
see how much it was going to
yeah.
cost?
how much is
60
it? Like 60
billion.
billion?
Half a trillion in total. Because apparently they're making
Jesus.
missiles out of like 46 carat.
Well, I
apparently.
think the 60 billion was, he said this is what it would cost Canada, but if Canada becomes a state, it would be free to
It just
Canadians.
makes
And
no
so look,
sense. Why would we ever do this? Like like ICBMs, like if we look at Israel, right, it's got an Iron Dome. We like understand what the Iron Dome is for. There's like the Arrow program for ICBMs, but you also know that the Arrow program is like not always successful because ICBMs are intercontinental ballistic. It's just so, everything about it is so stupid. I really like Carney because I think he's, honestly, watching his interview with Trump, I was like, this man can politic well. He like played the game well enough to get the tariffs reduced, which have been grueling for Canada, but he hardlined on certain things that like you need to hardline on. Like, yeah, Canada's not for sale. Like, we're not going to annex. The Golden Dome stuff, it's just so hard. I don't know what Trump is serious about or what he's not, because I don't know if Trump knows what he's serious about. In fact, I don't think his staff know what he's serious about, because the staff find out what he's going to be doing in the middle of like conferences where they're being grilled. So what do I think about it? I think it's stupid. I think it's a massive waste of money. I think it's insane to complain about government waste of money and then want to do this. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll say to piggyback on the Carney stuff. Like I didn't track his political career. My understanding is he was a banker, like a pretty successful one. He was interviewed by Jon Stewart before the election. But one thing that's impressed me about him is, like you said, the posture with Trump, because it's really tricky. You know, I don't envy foreign leaders when they have to deal with Trump, because yes, he's stupid, but he's also the most powerful man on earth, and that's like a really dangerous combination. And Carney did so well because I imagine the inclination is to roll over for him because of, you know, the trading relationship between Canada and the United States. But like you said, he pivoted so well because he was affable and respectful, but he also put his foot down multiple times during that conversation and said, he was like flat out like, no, okay, yes, Mr. President, we'll think about it. He's like, no, under no circumstances, Canada won't even entertain it. We have no interest in it. At one point, he said, he was like, well, having recently engaged with the owners of Canada, you know, the citizens of Canada, and it got a smile from Trump. He's like, I can assure you that we are not for sale. Like, that's really impressive. And the way that
the owner
Trump
of Canada is the king of Canada.
Yeah,
that's
The king of
technically true.
Canada.
You are a Commonwealth nation. That's true.
We
Like,
are.
yeah.
we
yeah.
could be sold at any moment. We could.
And
be
as a matter of fact,
annexed.
His Majesty, I believe, was in Canada speaking to the Parliament. But yeah, so he's done so well in the way that I think you can also evaluate it because of how Trump speaks about him afterwards. Because Trump talked mad shit about Trudeau.
They hated
But-
each other. Although there was
Yes.
suspicion that Melania might have like been fucking around with Trudeau a little bit. I don't know if you ever heard that, but
No, but that would be that's some salacious like fanfic like prompt right there. Like you know
look,
what I mean? Like they're-
I will die on the hill that Trudeau is Castro's son. Like I will die on that conspiracy. It's too good. It's too good. It's got to be true.
They do look
yeah,
very
I think
similar.
Carney is a really interesting. I was very dubious of Carney. I just didn't know if he was going to be good or not because he didn't have like a super public profile before then. And I haven't been tracking Canadian politics super closely since coming here and trying to get my immigration sorted. But honestly, I've been like blown out of the water with him. I feel like he's like this perfect example of like what good liberal left policies can look like. Like a strong backbone, hard lines on things that we like don't fuck with, but by and large trying to do pragmatic politics to do things that are best for your citizens fundamentally, and building and restoring allyship. Like just everything he's been doing, I've been like, yes, thank you. He's been like pivoting a bunch of energy of like focus, I think, on the energy sector. Like he just wants to make Canada finally pick a sector to specialize in, which is amazing because we just don't have the population to specialize in all sectors, which is something economists in Canada have been asking for years, like literally years and years and years. So yeah, I've been just kind of blown away. I feel like he's a very hopeful left representative in the kind of global climate.
Peterson.
He dances like a boomer, though.
Does he? He dances? Wait, what?
When he won, I don't know if you guys saw the victory celebration, but Mark Carney.
Oh, I did. I thought that was
dancing
like
in
an
the-
AI video or something, though. I thought that was like fake as fuck. Yeah.
Yeah. You were saying there, Josiah, sorry.
Well, right before the election, Piers Morgan interviewed Jordan Peterson, and Peterson spent half the interview like near tears because it was looking devastating for what was the guy's name?
Poilievre.
Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah.
He was so upset. He was like, it was one of the few times that Peterson was really triggered with Trump. He was basically like, I just wish he'd shut the fuck up. Like he didn't come out and say that, but he was like, it was just very ill-timed, like the timing of his remarks, because he's almost certainly handed the election to Carney.
He unequivocally. Did you see? I think it's the biggest popularity shift in any democracy's history. I could be wrong about any, but I think it's close. Liberals were at like 30% approval, and then it shot up to 70% after the Trump shit. It's crazy.
I love it. I wish our citizens and our voters were motivated negatively that way for Trump. I'd give anything for that, but
Canadians are hateful little fuckers. Okay, you piss us off, we're petty bitches. Okay, that's true and always has been. Canada's in World War II was one of the groups that did like some of the most like horrible war crimes to prisoners of war. Like we just refused to take prisoners of war.
little known secret, it was Canada that bombed Dresden. It was Canada alone. They were the ones who bombed Dresden.
No, it's okay, Canada. Disavow.
Boy, you look like you were going to talk.
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, I mean, part of the reason that happened as well is because Trudeau was also very personally unpopular, right? So it seems like Canadians really, I don't know, it seemed like it seemed like the story with Trudeau's political career, same thing with anybody who's in office for almost a decade. It's like you kind of eventually just accumulate, like so many people have like one reason to hate you after such a long period of time in office. And,
True.
you know, I think for the most part, history will be kind to Trudeau's legacy. But you know, on the 10th year of your prime ministership, it's difficult to maintain your popularity. Almost no leader is popular for that long in a democracy. So
When you consider the anti-incumbency context too, that was global at the time, so it wasn't just the fact that he was around for 10 years. It was the fact that in basically every situation, like some people cite, Macron barely managed to hang on to his presidency, but he had to form like a coalition, or not the presidency. It was the French parliamentary
Presidency.
No,
the
he was up
presidency.
for re-election. Okay.
Yeah,
And
but it wasn't that. I mean, it was smaller than he won by I think like 8 or so points, but it was much narrower
Well,
than historically.
it was both though, because he ran for re-election, but then there was also parliamentary
Gotcha,
elections,
okay.
and that was where the
Yeah.
coalition. That was where you had like the left and the center doing all this strategic voting to keep the fascists out of office, basically.
because that was supposed to be a
France.
fucking rout, and if I remember correctly too, it was supposed to be the same thing for. Well, wait a minute, it was conservatives in power in the UK before Labour.
That's right.
I can't remember what the pre-election forecast was. Was it like kind of
Labour-
It was dire.
Labor
For
was
Labour?
forecasted. No. They were forecasted to do very well in that election.
Very well,
Gotcha.
Yeah. And for the same reason, conservatives have been in
you
office
have
for so
Mexico, which is the same party but different candidate. Now you have Shane Baum in there instead of AMLO. I mean, for the most part, it was a rout for incumbents this past year. So if for no other reason, I would have expected Trudeau to be on his way out.
What do you guys
he was.
attribute that to? Like the frustration with incumbents?
Inflation, mostly.
Inflation.
I would say. Yeah.
I think
I mean, it
prices,
seemed.
yeah.
When you say
Yeah, 'cause-
inflation, because when I think inflation, I'm curious your thoughts on this actually, Boy. I think more specifically because it's not inflation alone. It's like people's perceived like wealth disparity. Like when we talk about inflation, we're also thinking about the fact that like you're hearing Democrats spending 20 million on like some stupid meeting about young men versus like people not being able to afford rent and the housing crisis and stuff. So when you say inflation, I guess what specifically do you mean by that?
I think it is very psychological when it comes to inflation, right? Because at the same time that you had, and I don't know about Canada or other countries, I know that I know Canada had a pretty generous stimulus as well during the COVID pandemic, 2,000 Canadian dollars a month for at least a temporary period of time, which is pretty generous. That's more than what we did here. But at the same time that you see people saying, oh, the economy at large is fucked, right? You see people say that their personal financial situation is actually doing just fine or doing well. And I think that just follows with the data. I mean, the data shows that, especially at this point in time, around the time of the American election, wages had recovered. Pretty much everyone had experienced either real wage increases or their wages had been stable in real terms, even adjusting for prices. And that's including low income people. But, people still, whether their income has gone up commensurately or not, they still see prices going up, and nobody likes to see prices going up. And it, to the extent that your wages are stable, like that can also make you feel pretty bad about it. It's like, oh, I got this 10% raise, but fuck it, everything at the fucking grocery store is 10% more expensive. You might not necessarily link the two, where it's like the inflation might have been what caused you to get a raise because of all the prices going up. But, people for a long time psychologically have just hated inflation a lot. You're always going to get blamed if you're the incumbent party when there's macroeconomic problems. That always, always, always happens. It's very, very rare for the economy at large to experience a problem like that and for the incumbent government to not be blamed for it. And so, that's what you saw. That's why you saw the whole fucking planet's worth of elections that happened. The incumbent parties seem to have lost. And they all have their own like marginal story. Like, oh, the Australian election's a little bit different than the UK election, than the French election, than the American election. But it's the aggregate big driver is just inflation, just prices going up.
Some leaders do seem more resilient than others, though. I mean, you have Modi in India, Bukele, people like that, like strongmen. I think also of Viktor Orban in Hungary. Some of these leaders do seem more resilient. And I wonder, and I honestly, Erdogan is another person, a person from Turkey, right?
Prime minister.
I
not
wonder
just a person.
President.
Yeah.
Was he president or prime minister?
Presidente.
We're gonna find out. I'm gonna fact check you on
Bet money
this.
right now. Just $5.
No, fuck you.
money.
No, because maybe I'm wrong.
You lost.
I
He's
told
gonna
you he
be
was
lost.
president,
Wrong.
asshole.
It's okay to be
This
wrong.
stupid son of a bitch right here said that he was prime minister.
Right.
You don't even know the three branches of government in Turkey.
That's right.
So dumb. You should
I
never
have
talk about anything ever again. That's so bad.
Execulature, judicialature. Yeah.
No, but I wonder honestly sometimes what accounts for that. And Trump, for all of the shit that's going down, he's pretty resilient as well. I don't want to overstate his or over negatize. I don't know the words. I don't have the right words. His poll numbers, and they've recovered a little bit. So he was at a low of like -8, -9. Now I think he's at -4, -5. Correct me if I'm wrong, Econo Boy. But he's resilient as well in the polling. And so something about being like a strong man, I don't know why you're able to blame people. You're able to, play to people's fears or something, but there is some resilience among
Do you think
some
it's
I mean,
a
that's-
populism element to this? Like when you're saying strong
Yeah.
men, do you think it's like what makes a leader a strong man in in its aesthetic? Is it populism? Is it kind of that like brashness and willingness to be rude?
Econo Boy our link, so he's going
Propaganda.
to tell you the
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just propaganda. I think a lot of it is how you frame yourself, right? And to be fair, you do have to have like, you can't be like a Democrat and just show up in a plaid shirt and expect everyone to think that you're one of the real ones, right? Like you do have to have kind of a history of of realness, right? Like similar to Bernie Sanders, right? I mean, you have, there's a lot of like Bernie Trump people, right? And I think that one of the reasons for that is not because Bernie and Trump are aligned on politics, but because I think that Bernie could, like, there was no way to paint Bernie as being, waffly on his positions, right? It was impossible to do because he just hasn't been, right? Whereas, to be honest, look, you can look at, Biden and say, look, this is a guy who's had extreme changes of opinion over a long political career. You can look at Kamala Harris and say, look, I mean, she ran as a progressive in the primary, but now she's all of a sudden trying to play the moderate. And can we really trust that? And meanwhile, Trump has always been crazy. He's always been very brash, right? And so, I think that's going to be the thing that makes the biggest difference. It's just like an extended campaign of what I would call propaganda, but obviously in some regards, Trump is just genuinely this way, right? So,
yes, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's a perceived authenticity to Trump. That's one of the things that we hear in, exit polls and focus groups. But unlike Bernie, whose positions have been relatively static, that's obviously not the case with Trump. Not only is he an inveterate liar, the likes of which we've never seen. I mean, he's just, in terms of American politics, by far the most documented liar we've ever seen. But he's even flipped on policy positions. Like, I and other, commentators tried to hit him with that, because he would say, well, he was, for example, he used to oppose H-1B visas, and now he does. Like he supports them now because Elon Musk does. And like there were all sorts of examples, like even during the campaign. I think it was Salt. I think he was the one who fucked over or capped Salt in his first administration and is now swinging to the left on that. Like, we're gonna undo the Salt. Motherfucker, you were the one who imposed it in the first place. And it doesn't stick with him. Like, so it's one of those things I keep saying. It's not that Trump is immune to political gravity, but he can bend it in ways we've just never seen before.
I think that Trump, it's a consistency, not necessarily in the individual positions. Like some of his positions have been remarkably consistent. Like he's been a big anti-trade guy since like the 80s, as far as I'm aware, right? He's always been very skeptical
How do you explain
of trade,
the unions?
Right?
How do you explain fucking the Sean O'Brien's union? I'm blanking on the names. The Teamsters? Yeah,
Sean O'Brien. Well, I mean, obviously, protectionist trade policy in theory would help unions, right? So I think that's part of it. I mean, I think as well, I mean...
But the Teamsters, right? The Teamsters can't be explained by that because the Teamsters, they benefit with these trade deals, I feel like.
What we have to keep in mind with unions and like Trump's union support, right, is that we don't have a labor movement in this country. The number of private sector union employees is very, very small. It's like 5% of workers are part of a private sector union. And so while it's the case that like, oh yeah, like amongst union workers, about half of them support Trump, maybe a slight majority, it's like, yeah, but that's not a robust, that's a small minority of the population ultimately is what we're speaking. And I'm sure if we talked about public sector union employees, like I'm sure like, public school teachers and people who work at the USPS, right? Like you're probably going to have a radically different set of opinions. Or you might look at some people like the ICE worker, the union for ICE workers, they were super pro Trump, right? For obvious fucking reasons, right? And so I don't think that this whole like, oh, the working class just loves Trump thing is really that real. Now, it is true that Democrats have bled support on the working class. You can look at some of those exit polls. But I think that unfortunately, a lot of people say, oh, look at what Biden did. Hello, Hutch. Hello, welcome. Look at what Biden did. Biden was like a super pro-worker candidate, and it didn't pay off at all. And it's like, well, yeah, but I mean, look at a lot of the policies that he did and like the actual ground impact they had, right? A lot of them, from the infrastructure plan to the IRA, very, very delayed in impact, right? They're good things, but they're delayed in impact. Look at the NLRB. His NLRB board was radically pro-labor, but the way that we do labor organizing in this country from a structural perspective is very, very tilted towards capital owners, right? So even if you have a really good NLRB board, it's not going to actually spur a huge amount of unionization activity in this country. And when you look at union membership, even under Biden, it remained relatively flat despite high-profile cases. So until we get a Democrat that actually does do a lot of ground-level things to help the working class, that thesis is still out.
I want to double down on the Teamsters thing though, because here's an easy, concrete like.
I hate Sean O'Brien, dude.
Fuck yes, I do.
Too. No.
He's a fucking piece of shit. And Anna Kasparian
Would you
and
call him
Cenk
a scab?
Uygur cheerleading for this guy is so frustrating. He's the
Wait,
poor
why do you
man's.
hate him so much?
So, because he didn't back the Democrats in this last election when
He showed disloyalty.
President Biden saved the Teamsters pensions with funds from the American Rescue Plan. So it's like you, Kyla, leading an organization, and I save your fucking organization, and Republicans oppose everything. They didn't support the legislation at all, voted against it, that I used to save your organization's pensions, and you turn around and back them. No, fuck you. To the extent that there is a transactional element to politics, where, hey, you do shit for me, I'll support you, and thus the cycle repeats. Well, I did my part, motherfucker. I saved your pensions. The team you backed did not.
Wait,
they
hold on.
actually
Excuse
opposed
me.
it.
Josiah, did Sean O'Brien endorse Donald Trump?
He spoke at the RNC, and
But no, did he endorse Donald Trump? Though,
No, you're right.
Josiah?
He did not. But he
Nobody
should
shit
have.
talks Democrats.
Well,
He shit
hold
talks
on.
Democrats.
Now
He-
I feel like we're like threading hairs that don't need to be threaded, right? Like if you're talking, if
No.
you're like performing in most ways slightly supportive, at least of Trump, in such a contentious thing, I feel like there's some level of hits that you get to take. No, we don't get to thread hairs like this tight.
Oh yes. I agree
Yeah.
with that. Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah, and I mean, like, he didn't he
He's
like
about
shit
to tell
talk
them
Bernie
again.
Sanders recently too? He's like Bernie
Yes.
Sanders
Yes.
using a private jet or whatever. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
fuck
no,
that
it's,
guy.
it's such garbage. It's the kind of like a thing that a lot of these anti-environmental people will do is they'll be like, "Wow, like flight. Look at how many flights you take on a private airline." Now, different things in different contexts have different impacts and different rationales, right? Like if you needed a private flight to save someone's life, maybe that makes sense. If you're chartering a private flight for security, personnel, logistics issues, and you're carrying with you a team, then it's not like this is some incredible luxury. You're doing so because it's necessary to do the kind of tour they're doing in the security, in the secure and logistically viable way. And so it was just such an unfair snipe. It's an attack that isn't justified. The environmental impact of flight in general is low compared to the other sources of pollution and that kind of thing. And so it was a kind of shitty. I did want to jump on something because in addition to the Supreme Court, in addition to Sean O'Brien, Josiah also hates the Supreme Court. And you said the NLRB, Econoboy, and we just had a horrible political ruling from the Supreme Court on the leadership structure of the NLRB. I don't know if you saw it, Josiah, but I would like to talk about it for a second.
Do they basically
Talk
defang
about
Humphreys?
Can you get guys define NLRB because I know that my audience.
The National Labor Relations Board, they're in charge of a lot of like labor relations in the country. They'll oftentimes will help to like certify or make sure that there's accreditation for a union. If there's disputes, oftentimes they'll have a kind of judicial role. They'll also have kind of a rules-based role. So it's a very important organization, historical organization. And one of the key goals of Project 2025 was to overturn this case called, quote, Humphrey's Executor. That case, Humphrey's Executor, established that there are some agencies that you're allowed to insulate from the president's removal authority, their leadership structure. Typically, there's an assumed constitutional ability for the president to remove heads of agencies. But this Supreme Court ruling from like the 30s said, okay, some independent agencies that have a kind of quasi-judicial, quasi-legislative role or that exercise some kind of authority that is more like expertise based. In that case, it was the Federal Trade Commission. They're allowed to have some for-cause removal protection for their heads. And for a while, right, because Project 2025 and these fascists want to like get rid of all the checks on Trump's power, they want to get rid of that precedent. And so Trump, what he did was to test that precedent because he knows he has a lot of allies in the courts. He fired a bunch of people where the law says they have for-cause removal. And he specifically said, I'm firing you without cause just because I want to. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court on an emergency docket. And what the Supreme Court did for the NLRB is they said, you know what? We're not going to say whether you're likely to win on the merits, but we think at this moment there's like a great deal of exercise of executive power that the NLRB has. And so we're just going to issue a stay, and we're not really going to seriously consider the other stay factors. But what they're doing is they're signaling that Humphrey's executor is either going to get overturned or it's going to get narrowed significantly. But in coming to that decision that is completely unconnected to the precedent, completely unconnected to the stay factors and the law, they have this like extra little paragraph where they say, but don't worry.
About the
Don't
Federal
worry.
Reserve?
The Federal Reserve is not going to be touched because so no one's asking them to rule on the Federal Reserve, right? It's an advisory opinion, so that's improper. You're not allowed to just like, it's like Clarence Thomas, just like pondering about the legality of other things. You're not supposed to do that as an Article 3 court. And the Federal Reserve, and Kagan calls them out for this, is justified by the exact same precedent,
statutes.
Humphrey's executor, the same, and they also have forecast removal. So in order to settle the markets, the Supreme Court is signaling in advance in a corrupt way. But don't worry, our unitary executive theory, obviously it doesn't extend to the Federal Reserve because that would be bad for business. It's so blatantly political. It's awful.
Real quick,
I think
so I've got to take my dog out just real quick here. I just want to say real quick before I pop out and let you all finish this, and I'll be right back in about 5 minutes. Somebody says most of the union stuff is rough because most of the people in unions are extremely socially conservative. So union boss backing Dems is dangerous for them at the union level. The only thing I'm just going to respond to that is to me this is proof positive that simply delivering material benefits to people is not a panacea, not a guarantee that you will get their political support. One of the things that we hear from progressives all the time is that you don't worry about messaging, just deliver the goods and the votes will come. I don't believe that's true because otherwise Teamsters would have overwhelmingly backed the Democrats instead of Trump. And so I think that's kind of debunks the thing. I'll be right back. You guys continue the conversation.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think...
I was just going to say, just for your audience, because I feel like they keep getting mad that I don't know lots of domestic stuff. I'm not a domestic politics commentator in any way, shape, or form. I don't talk about American domestic politics by and large, except for like larger philosophical stuff and some like commentary on like how systems of democracy work. So like I'm not pretending to be. I'm happy to learn from you guys and stuff, but I'm not pretending to be that. Just
Don't listen to them.
Well,
yeah,
I think it's really important that like in the liberal space, right? We have to make a little bit of flexibility for people to not know things, right? And I just want to make it clear to my audience and to your audience, I'm not pretending to be an expert by any means. I'm asking you guys questions because you guys know stuff about this. My job for the last 2 years was facilitating you guys getting to talk to other people because you guys know about this stuff.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I think that one of the things that, I don't know. I'm curious about what the total impact of like getting rid of the Humphreys case will be, with the exception of the Federal Reserve specifically. Because look, if the Supreme Court says, "Hey, look, the way that the Federal Reserve is organized, if you want to insulate organizations from, basically firing." You have to organize things like the Federal Reserve. And for those that don't know, the way that the Federal Reserve is organized is you have the Board of Governors, which is essentially it's a board, but it's also an organization, but it's just an overseeing organization for the regional banks. And the board is just nominated by the president. And I guess in theory, you couldn't do anything to save those people necessarily with this ruling. But the regional banks, right, the people who are doing all those groundwork, those are technically privately owned institutions. Now, the reason I say technically is because the way, and it's kind of bizarre that they had the foresight to structure it this way, it's the most independently structured institution in our government. The way that the regional banks work is to be a member bank to the regional banks, you basically just have to be a bank above a certain size, and that comes with its advantages and its disadvantages. One of the advantages is that you can essentially get capital from the Federal Reserve directly, and one of the caveats is that you have to buy into ownership to this quasi-private institution. So technically the private banks are owned, the regional banks are owned by all these private financial institutions, but the caveat is that stock cannot be transferred and you cannot actually make management decisions to the Federal Reserve. So it's like kind of like paper ownership. And the only right that you get as an owner is that you get to appoint 6 of the 9 board members to this organization. Private institutions get to do that. But the caveat to even that is that you have to appoint 3 of your 6 appointees to represent the public interest. So even though it's your appointee, you have to appoint them to represent the public interest. And only 3 of the 9 board members on each of these banks can represent private interests. And so, look, frankly, I think a lot of our institutions probably should be set up that way, right? You probably should have these quasi-private corporate structures. You see this in a lot of other countries. You see this in Singapore, for instance, with how they organize all of their sovereign wealth fund ownership, right? You have this kind of quasi-private corporate structure. And the whole reason that you do that is basically just to insulate organizations that we find to be extremely structurally important for the government from, political interference, right? And
I was just
going to say that if the Supreme Court is basically just saying that, then I say, hey, okay, hopefully Congress takes that seriously and stops terribly structuring our government. That's one of the worst things about America is every fucking time we do anything in this country, it is the most poorly structured, poorly thought out bullshit of an institution you've ever heard of, and it pisses me off. So maybe this freaking ruling will cause them to do the smart thing instead. Anyway, I'm sorry, I got a little triggered at the end.
No. It's a great point. It's the first thing I thought of is like, well, does this just mean that you can structure every agency like the Federal Reserve, and that's a get out of president removal power jail card?
But wait, what's the meaningful difference if it cites the same statutory authority? Like, what's the meaningful?
It's not
statutory.
So it is the precedent of Humphrey's executor, and what the Supreme Court is proposing to do, or it's signaling it might do, is narrow it to this kind of historical case that's similar to the First and Second National Bank of the United States, where you have this kind of private-public mixture. And what Econoboy is saying is, well, wouldn't this just usher in, for those of us that want genuine independent agencies, a kind of new structure that follows the Federal Reserve that will tend to be more independent from the executive? What I think is, yes, theoretically, conceptually, Econoboy's completely correct, but I just don't trust the Supreme Court to be consistent. And they'll just say, the second that the Democrats try to pass something like a Federal Reserve version of the NLRB, they'll be like, oh, no, it's just for financial institutions, not for labor. Obviously, like, we would never extend the structure precedent of the Federal Reserve to labor.
It is possible.
Expand the court.
Constitutional law is all made up. It's not real. And so Pisco is right. You could have a complete inconsistency here. But to Josiah's point, that's why, look, just expand the court. Who gives a fuck? Just put people that agree with you on the court. I've been on that train for a long time. And the only one of the main reasons I've been on that train for a long time is because constitutional law is not real. It's not a real thing. It's all just made up, okay? Nobody's consistent. Everyone just makes bullshit up. Oh, I just have this thought process, and that's how I'm going to rule. And that's fine. I don't actually have a huge problem with that, okay? Let's just agree that that's what's happening, and then just throw a bunch of people on there that you agree with. Hey, person who wants to be on the Supreme Court, I'm the Democratic president. Do you agree with this, and this? You do? There you go. There's your nomination then, because you agree with me, and you agree that you're going to rule in the way that I want. Anyway, sorry.
Would you want term limits then on the Supreme Court, or would you give them basically that immunity?
Yeah, you should have all kinds of structural reforms to the Supreme Court, of course, to try and insulate this process. What I would do is pack the court and close the door on the way out, to where you pack the court, you add like 4 members to the court, but then you have like independent appointment processes, and you have all of these different sort of like procedural checks and balances to try and ensure that you have independent nomination processes. I mean, I think the best way to probably do it is to require, say, an independent trade group to vet nominees before they're actually presented to the president for nomination. And that could be a contingency to the Senate confirmation process. Like, you can't confirm somebody until they've passed this vetting. Anyway, Pisco, it seems like you have something you really want to share.
And has Hutch even gotten in here? I mean, Hutch has been
Hutch has not said a word. I do want to pass it over to Hutch in a second, but maybe Hutch can respond to this. I don't know. But I just saw a court ruling that Trump's Liberation Day tariffs exceeded his authority, and he can't bypass Congress to set trade policy, and that the tariffs are unconstitutional.
Ooh.
Federal court, the Supreme Court's not going to agree, Pisco, because it's all made up. It's all made up, Pisco. Nothing's real.
What percentage would you put that the Supreme Court will uphold this in anyway?
I have not briefed the issues, but if I'm just going off my vibes, I think more likely than not, I think 60%, because I think that these tariffs,
that they will support this,
that they will not support Trump's tariffs. I think that Trump's tariffs are clearly beyond the scope that Congress envisioned for the president to have, which is much more narrow. And in this instance, it's specifically delegated to Congress the power to impose tariffs in Article 1. And so it's a humongous ruling. And I think the Supreme Court,
massive,
they could give Trump a win. Yeah, they could give Trump a win for sure. But if just going off my vibes, again, not briefing the issues, and I will take a look at these cases, I think that they're more likely than not to uphold. This is just my vibes. But that said, it would be huge. It would be huge if he lost that power, and if he couldn't do these kind of gamesmanship anymore. That would be ridiculous.
It actually might help him in the long run. His polls might come back up. So just so I understand, because like Aaron Frischner is reporting on this, all of the tariffs are vacated, quote, and their operation permanently enjoined. There isn't a delay unless a higher court grants one on appeal by the administration. Trump loses most of his tariffs are removed. So again, I don't want to make sure. I could be confusing the legal jargon here, but this is like nationwide, right, Pisco? This means this applies to all tariffs or all applicable tariffs under the
And this
IEEPA.
is one of the cases, yes. And this is one of the cases in which, so those of you who are tracking the nationwide injunction stuff, you actually could not make this anything other than a nationwide injunction. This is one of those examples that every Supreme Court justice seemed to agree with. It's indivisible relief. That is to say, you can't individualize it to just one plaintiff, and tariffs need to be uniform across the country under the Constitution. And so this is one case in which you can't complain that one district court is making this decision, because granting full relief to even one plaintiff means granting it to everybody. And that's what's so nobody can do the whole nationwide injunction things. This couldn't happen any other way because of the indivisible nature of the relief at issue.
So if he wanted to go forward with tariffs after this, would he basically have to mostly just go through Congress? Would that be his limit?
There could still be some like room for tariff, emergency tariffs, stuff like that are actual genuine emergencies and things like that. So this is not getting rid of all the president's authority that was granted to it by Congress. But he can't he can't change trade policy on a dime like this, the way he's doing it, in obvious like bad faith ways. And if this is upheld, it would be a huge, limitation of Trump's authority. I mean, so much of his like corruption has been centered around a lot of this tariff stuff.
Dude, Waja Ali's tweet here says a lot of billionaires are quietly very happy about this. It's funny to think about, like, how happy is Bill fucking Ackman right now? You know what I mean? Like, how happy Jeff Bezos and all these others as well. This is like, thank fucking God.
Probably Elon too.
Probably Elon. You're right.
Yeah, true, Hutch.
Hutch, how are you, man?
Did you see the
Well, wait a minute. How about we ask how fucking Hutch is first, okay?
Oh, yeah.
He's not just a piece of meat. He's not just here for political commentary. He's a friend. Hutch, how are you doing, buddy?
Hey, wow. Appreciate that. I'm doing good. It's kind of an interesting week. Had a crazy debate yesterday. His name's Vadim. I don't know. Some of you guys are probably familiar with him.
I heard something about this. Yes. How'd it go?
Yeah, it was like a 4.5 hour debate, and it got kind of wild. And then like Lonerbach showed up, and Mudahar showed up, and
what was it on?
We were talking a lot about like. So I don't know if you know this about me, Kyla, but I tend to spar a lot with the left, and
I think I know something about you in that way. Yeah, I've noticed.
And so it started kind of generally about like disagreements about like, I guess, tactics, and then it turned into a conversation about
Israel Palestine. I'm just confirming, right?
Yeah, we got there, but I mean, like, it was in the context of like the Hassan Ethan drama, and I mean that was like one of the craziest debates I've ever been a part of. Like, I don't know. I guess you just have to see it to know what I was talking about.
Because it got really intense and spicy, or because of length, or both?
Yeah, I mean, both.
Okay.
Yeah, both. Ethan talked about it on stream today. He's like he's like set up. He wants me to come on at some point, so it's like. And then that invites like bro. I mean, like, I already have like a small little cadre of like lefty accounts on Twitter that just. Speaking of your Vanguard boys, Josiah. I don't know if you know this.
What about?
They talk so much shit about Hutch.
Bro, they are.
I know they used to. They like went after you. They went after you for the fucking lip ring.
What did you do? What did you say?
You'd have to ask them. I mean, like, one of them made fun of me for having a lip ring at one point when the co-host
I'm aware of that.
when the co-host has a nose ring, but like, no, they like, you should watch. They reacted to us talking to Crystal Ball, and you should watch the video because like they paused the video. Sorry, what?
They're just mad about it generally.
These people fucking, I'm telling, like, these people fucking hate me. They've hated me for a long time because I insist on like just being super practical and pragmatic. Like, that's like my guiding principle, and they just fucking hate that. And so,
I didn't realize like there was like new anti-Hutch content. But yeah,
we should invite them on, is what I'm saying. I would like to have
let's bring our boys on.
Yeah.
Wait, Peaceful, are you friends with the Vanguard?
We've collabed. So Josiah's collabed with them. I think I've definitely collabed with them. We had a good conversation. I don't think they've collabed with Econoboy, but if they're going against my boy Hutch, I mean, shit's gonna get weird.
We're gonna have to ref that. It's gonna be super awkward.
On the live and learn, guys.
Oh dear.
No, guys, we're all friends, right? We should all be friends.
Yeah, I really like Zach and Gavin from the Vanguard. I thought their attacks on you were like over the lip ring, like that was like fucked up and petty. But I mean,
but everything else not petty.
Well, I haven't heard the other criticisms. I don't know what
they called me. For example, they call me a Destiny sycophant, which is pretty fucking unbelievable. I mean, I realize that's a very difficult topic, but like it's unbelievable. Like, it's completely like baseless, right?
Yeah, so, that's not fair. I imagine, like, as a general, like, even our disagreements, they disagree with. They think Democrats are able to do things that Democrats are not able to do. with the margins that they have. So
Yes, I've talked to these guys before. I'm being an
yeah.
asshole. I definitely know who the Vanguard is. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I didn't forget.
No, like we definitely set that up. I'm sure they'd be game for it too. Now it might get heated, so prepare yourself for that. But
no. If they don't like Hutch.
no, not here, not now. I'm just saying, like, Hutch, if you want them to join Live and Learn.
Yes,
so
Hutch.
I would rather have these conversations face to face because they're like reacting to my content. Like, for example, let me give you one example. But like,
right.
I said that, like, I guess one of them tweeted out that Joe Biden should have forgiven more student debt. And I just obviously pointed out, I'm like, I pointed out the Supreme Court thing. I don't remember how I phrased the tweet.
Right.
And the guy in the video that I watched today, which one is the one that doesn't have long hair?
Zach.
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 Yeah, he goes, Hutch interacted with my tweet the other day, and he, said that the Supreme Court struck down the student debt relief. And it's like, Hutch, executive order, you ever heard of that? It's like, come on, use your brain. And I'm like,
did he really?
Well, the Supreme Court struck down the executive order. So
Pisco, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, the problem with that is if President Biden were to sign a more expansive executive order to cancel student loans, it would just have been struck down by the Supreme Court, which is the same thing that happened in, was it Mohila versus Missouri or whatever?
I think I have two thoughts on that. One, I actually do think it would be legally more justifiable to get rid of all student loans. But I still agree with Josiah that they're looking for a reason to stop it. And I do agree with Hutch that the courts almost certainly would have ruled against him based on, their major questions, doctrine, sub-thesis. I almost think that the court was signaling that they would strike down a more expansive one when they said the major questions doctrine thing, because they technically didn't rely on the major questions doctrine. But it's just like the same with the Federal Reserve. They're signaling to the executive branch, hey, we're going to strike this down if you try to do something more expansive, even though legally, justifiably, there's more legal basis to get rid of all the student loan debt. But I want to say one more thing, though. I think Biden should have shredded all of the documents from the Department of Education.
Exactly. No, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I wish we had a penny
and run
president
the
because
fuck out of those.
Look,
things.
Zach and Gavin are absolutely correct.
Yeah.
If President Biden, and again, I think it's great. It's just it parlays so well with the immunity ruling as well, right? Because if President Biden came out and he was like, look, I'm not canceling student debt. I'm just completely destroying the ability to collect the loans mechanically, right? Like, they're saying I have to collect this. They're saying I have to collect this debt, but I don't know who it owes to. Like, what am I doing? I'm not going to open an investigation, right? I mean,
you could just say that this is one of those senior moments. Those senior moments I was having.
Right.
The executive gets to decide whether to keep documents, right?
Exactly.
You have to keep those documents,
right?
I'm allowed to determine
students so much. Why do you hate students? Like, so much.
Point.
I mean,
class people.
A little bit of it is like misogyny, to be honest with you. Like most college students are female or women, so like
how much when you say a little bit,
part of it.
Can you like quantify it? When you say a little bit, can you like?
I don't like trust women. Is what I'm. No, I'm just playing. I supported student debt relief. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if they, I'd have to listen to the specific complaint, but if it was just like, hey, he should have had a different executive order, which was more expansive, that wouldn't have worked because the Supreme Court would have struck that down anyway. Now, if their argument was, and this is where you need to tell me, Hutch, Biden's executive order would have been struck down no matter what, but we would have wanted him to get caught trying, like basically go for the 3-pointer and, have it overturned. Like, then I would understand, because a lot of people argue for that on the left. Like, okay, we understand that, it would run into the Supreme Court, but we want to see more aggressive virtue signaling from Biden on these things. What was their criticism? Was it they wanted him to get caught trying, or they thought that an executive order would literally solve the problem?
No, they literally just said like, ever heard of executive orders? Like, use your brain. And that was
Zach, Gavin, if you're watching, guys, that just wouldn't have worked. That just wouldn't have worked. Now with the
I want to ask Kyla, I don't know if you guys have talked to her about it yet, but like your appearance on like whatever with Andrew Wilson, did you guys discuss that yet?
No, not yet. Go ahead.
Andrew Wilson.
About Jay Dyer.
It was Jay Dyer and Jim Bob. Andrew Wilson, I debated on whatever like a year and a half ago, I think.
That's what Hutch is talking about. He wants to go back. He wants to.
Okay. So I'm just remembering. I'm confusing it. But no, you had a recent appearance on whatever. I mean, like, can you talk about like you've been on there multiple times, right? Like, what's that experience like? Like, you show up to the studio, and then what is that? How does that play out?
It's very there's
inviting.
No AC. I don't know if you guys know this, but California hasn't learned a technology called AC. I didn't know that California was just like kind of technologically reductive like that. But that's
Neither
cool
has
for
Canada, to be fair, erudite. Come
Yeah,
on.
but we don't need it. We would need AC for like a month.
I think it's because you haven't figured it out. I think that's why Canada.
We just
Oh.
store ice blocks in our basement and then lay on it in the summer.
That's a good point.
So it's stifling hot. It is. You walk in, it is like burning hot. Brian's super great. He's very like friendly, reasonable. The frustrating part is like
Who's Brian? Is he the host?
Brian's the host. Is
Got
that
it.
like he's like the moderator, but he's only going to moderate against the my side, right? And
The
so
woman,
it's like
yeah.
I think I basically got interrupted the whole time from Jay Dyer. He was calling me like fat at one point. He kept talking like, you're
What the
bulking.
fuck?
You're bulking. Because somebody at the very beginning been like, oh, Erudite, you're looking a little fat. And I was like, well, yeah, I just like finished a bulk. Like I was just being autistic and responded seriously to a fucking, I shouldn't have, obviously. And then like in the middle of us talking about sex versus gender, I was like, well, how do you define sex? And he was like, penis. And I was like, you realize like even at a biological level, like you at least need to talk about things like gametes. Like I start listing a number of other things that matter for determining sex. And he just starts screaming over top of me, oh, you're bulking. And I don't know why I didn't do this. I should have just been like, stand up. Okay, motherfucker, stand up and we'll compare and we'll see who's fucking bulking right now.
The reason why they don't. The reason they never define that, erudite, and you're right to get those definitions, is because the minute they say small gametes or large gametes, or if they say chromosomes, or if they say sexual organs, they recognize that then biologically, scientifically, there are more than two sexes, and they know that that's coming because they know that there have been cases of individuals who produce no gametes.
Most of these people don't know what gametes means. Like, I asked them to define a gamete. I was like, "What is a gamete?" And they like would.
And they're like executive, legislative, judicial.
Which is wild because these are the debate bros of the Christian world. These are the presuppositions. They actually suck. And if you're a presuppositional thinker, and I think Wilson is another one. They're so insecure about you clarifying terms like Kyla was doing in the general. And I think it's such a nice antidote to what they're doing. But in general, you should know the arguments against your position. And we've done this sex gender argument enough times that they should know it's a losing argument. And so great job.
Yeah. So it was very interesting. Jay was pretty friendly like beforehand. We were like tossing jokes. He was showing me his music that he makes live. And I was like, oh, cool. Because I'm a nice person and I tend to.
How does his music compare to Tim Pool's?
Tim Pool makes music? I had no idea.
Oh, you didn't know that?
Boy.
Yo, put it on.
No, fuck you. I'm not going to.
Put it on.
If we're going to put that on, you have to sing Les Mis. Pisco.
Oh, no. God, fuck.
I know.
Did you hear me sing Les Mis?
No, the chat keeps asking me to do it. So.
Okay, later on. It'll come naturally. But no,
Tim Pool's got he's got a few music videos that are very entertaining.
When Sam Cedar made fun of him and caused him to like fucking spiral for months about it.
Sam Cedar was banned from the show for a while.
For that?
Actually. Well, he was banned, but it was clearly temporary because he was recently on again. There's a reason why Tim Pool needs guests all of a sudden to go on his show. But anyway, he's got a lot of hobbies. I didn't know Tim Pool was so into skateboarding. I really hadn't followed him that well. I didn't even know that. He was playing with his little fingerboard.
Did you see the death drop? Did you see the death drop when you went into the compound, Econoboy?
Yeah, for people that don't know, he has 2 skate parks on his compound. He's got like his own like skateboard ramp, but then when you go into the warehouse, he has like a whole like an actually like fucking Fantasy Factory looking skate park in his compound warehouse or whatever. My understanding is that it is under construction though. It looked like they were doing a lot of shit to it when I was there, so it was a pretty crazy.
You have to sign a release. You have to sign a release and like hand over the rights to your firstborn child before you're able to.
I forgot about the release signature. Yeah.
So guys, we're all.
There's a release. I didn't sign anything.
I think it's just liability. You didn't sign a release.
You
No.
didn't sign anything? Oh,
No, I
fuck,
just
they're
showed
gonna
up.
kick down your door.
I'm not signing. You
They
remember
just showed up. I just showed up, and they're like,
Yeah.
"All right, here's this thing." I'm like, "All right, I'm gonna do it, I guess." I don't. They didn't ask me to sign anything. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Okay, I would never sign away my rights to Tim Pool, unlike you guys apparently. Okay, but no, I didn't sign anything. Fortunately, I guess.
And speaking of Hutch, she's actually got an appearance on Tim Pool this Friday.
Oh, that's great. I'm definitely going to tune into that for sure. That's awesome.
Yeah. So
I wanted to like delve more into your experience still. Like, can you just like after you go on whatever, like what do your socials look like for a few days?
honestly, in this case, so I set up a pretty good clip system like right before going in. And like big shout out to community members. We just started farming clips like crazy. My socials blew up, like blew the fuck up. Which is really good. I think I gained overall, I think I gained 3,000 followers, I think cross platform probably. I think more by this point.
Nice.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
but I like really popped off. You always know that you've like done a good job if there's people that come to you like, you're still wrong, but you did a pretty good job. And I'm like, man, the fact that they can even admit that, and I'm a woman,
That's the litmus
like,
test.
that's a pretty big compliment. I don't know. I personally, when I fight with like really hateful, like tratty men and stuff like that, I will say like their community's really like aggressive on Twitter, and they'll just like post memes of me like going like this to like them to make fun of them or whatever. But honestly, the most like deranged hate I've ever gotten has always been from leftists. Like all my swatting histories, all my doxing histories, it's always from leftists. So like they're not too
I
bad.
believe it. Sorry.
Yeah. Like honestly, they're pretty good.
Do you get like unhinged like death threats from any of the people when you go on
Leftists?
whatever?
No,
Or period.
no, leftists exclusively. Yeah, leftists, but not never from the. I think the worst that's happened with gripers. There's one griper that will send me like deep fake porn that he makes of me, and that's about it. Which is weird, but I just block the email. So
That's pretty weird. You know, I wouldn't put that in the normal category
not
personally.
normal. But the amount of swatting attacks I've had from leftists is a lot higher. So I don't know. For like
Jesus.
being a nobody, I'm like literally a nobody. So yeah, it's a little deranged. So yeah, my socials are pretty good. And then me and Brian honestly get along super well. Like we have the same humor style. So it's this weird mixture where I'm like, Brian, like, why are you like Brian
way
would
you
literally
are.
tell me in between debates that he's like, yeah, Jay was so annoying. He was awful. And I'm like, then moderate them. Just moderate them. But money,
Is he audience captured? Like, is that what
They're
it is?
audience captured. They all are.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. But like Brian always treats me super well, gets me food. He helps like cover my like travel and stuff like that. So honestly, he's great to me, like Brian. The social wise, I posted a couple of clips. Jay Dyer blocked me pretty quickly.
Lol.
So I guess there's not a rematch coming.
I don't think so. A bunch of his fans did like this like Grok who won, and all the AI systems keep saying that I won because I just didn't devolve in it. Like it wasn't a debate. It literally instantly was just him insulting me and interrupting me and being like, what's your system of like, you know, I'm a presuppositionalist and I solve Agrippa's trilemma by being coherent. And I'm like, you can't solve Agrippa's trilemma. That's what Agrippa's trilemma is. Nobody solves it. That's why this entire conversation is fucking stupid. It's because all axioms are circular fundamentally. And we just circled that for like 3 hours. That was the whole conversation. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, presuppositionalists are amongst the most bizarre group of people on the internet. I understand that they're all pretty much descended from Darth Dawkins, who has been a debater. If anyone who's heard of Darth Dawkins, he's a extremely old
Richard
school.
Dawkins? Like
No,
No.
this is Darth Dawkins, Josiah. This is his evil.
I define
twin.
God as the
No.
absolute, uncontingent.
Yeah. Darth Dawkins is he's an extremely old school like Discord debater. He's like Ask Yourself before Ask Yourself was himself, right? It's like he's been debating the same topic, which is basically, does God exist? You know, is there a God? Is there a Christian God? And he's been debating that same topic on the internet. I mean, I don't want to exaggerate, but like 15 years or something. Like he's been an online internet debate. He doesn't have a channel. It's such a bizarre thing because he doesn't have a channel. He doesn't live stream. He's only known as like a guy who debates on Discord, and he's been doing it for like 15 years. And
Crazy.
Don't compare him to Ask Yourself. Come on, have some
no,
respect
I'm not
for
saying
Ask
I'm not no,
Yourself.
but Ask Yourself is similar because Ask Yourself doesn't.
Who's
It's like
Ask Yourself?
Ask Yourself is like a vegan and like morality debater online. And I understand Ask Yourself to not really create much sort of content. He really
Oh, I
more
see what you
so,
mean.
yeah, he really more so is
I got
like
you.
known as a debater, not really a content creator. And so similarly, Darth Hawkins is that, but for presuppositionalism. And yeah, for those that don't know, presuppositionalism is like the belief that essentially you can
Presuppose God.
you can essentially presuppose that God exists, and then that's just fine. That's all the justification you
How
need
do
for
they
God actually
logically?
existing.
So how do they presuppose that like the Christian God is the correct God? Like how do they use the laws of logic to get there?
They are triune. There's like a specific set of criteria.
My experience is that they will say that that God has revealed himself to them.
Yeah.
And of course you'll ask, well, how do you know that you can trust your sense data? Like maybe it's been revealed to me that your God isn't real. And
Right.
it's like Muslim God or whatever.
Yeah.
And they'll just say, oh, well, yeah, but God has revealed himself to me. Right. And it's like, that's how I know. Right. Like and that's it. Like it's really that simple. You really don't find this argument anywhere outside of the debate space, in my experience. Like no, like Christian philosopher thinks this, right?
It's just dumb, right? Because
Well, they are.
At all, like fundamentally every single belief system at a core level is circular. Like it always is, right? This is like what Agrippa's trilemma is. So it's like a lot of presuppositionalists think that they've solved it. Did you guys know what Agrippa's trilemma is? Not to be like saying this word over and over.
I do, but the others don't. So why don't you explain it for them?
That's true. That's true.
So in the same way, I definitely didn't mean to say karmi. I meant to say karni. It's basically like three fallacies that all belief systems fall into. Dogmatism, which is essentially believing something regardless of evidence. That's what presuppositionalists fall to. Infinite regression, which is like, have you guys ever heard the frame like turtles all the way down?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's like there's just a turtle on the bigger back of a different turtle. It's like most like foundationalists, most science believers fail the infinite regression because it's like, well, what came before the Big Bang? And it's like, and it's like before the Big Bang, where the dust come from that made the big, and then the final one is circular logic, right? It's just like where the A equals B and B equals A and A equals B, and they like self-define each other. And all belief systems fail this. All of them, which is why when presuppositionalists are like, you're based on nothing and I'm based on something. It's like, no, we're all just being circular because you have to. You just accept it at some point. Like that's just, we all moved on from this because it's stupid and boring to talk about.
Yeah. And strictly speaking, like the not God theory is more parsimonious, right? Like there's a reason to think that, if you're going to just presuppose.
Don't make up words.
Okay. That's fair. I'm sorry. Parsimonious just means simple. It's like the shorter theory. Look, that's what the philosophers use. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, but
don't apologize for your loquaciousness.
You're smart, okay, fine.
Yeah.
No, but
never apologize for your loquaciousness, Econo boy.
Yeah, I was debating a guy. No, I was debating a guy a while ago who said, he's like, well, God was revealed to me, and I trust my senses because God has told me to trust my senses. And it's like, well, that's circular. And what he said to me was, it's okay to be circular if it refers to God. But other than that, it's never okay to be circular. And it's like, but that's just, again, you're just assuming that that's true. I would say, look, a lot of my theories are circular. Like, if you ask me,
utilitarianism is circular, right?
Yeah.
I believe.
Well, like, why don't you?
The world? Why? Because I think it's good to do. Why do you think it's good?
Yeah,
it's good.
exactly.
Like,
but it doesn't
My
refer
God
to
demands
God,
a blood
right?
sacrifice every night, so I don't know how to square that
I'll just
with
get that
like
every night. That's crazy.
cultural norms, but God
And the
wants
reason
what he
I
wants.
say, when I say Christian philosophers don't think this, I'm just saying that, you won't find a lot of actual Christian academic, like historian philosophers, like theology people, like people in the Catholic Church, like all those cardinals. Well, like if you go to the Catholic Church, like the cardinals who spent their whole fucking entire lives like studying Catholic theology, none of them are presupposition. Like this is a very bizarre belief, even amongst like very, very devout people who've studied this for their life. It's
the alternative is just faith. It's just acknowledging that it's faith, or
it's dogmatism. Like the answer to presuppositionalism is dogmatism. The answer to like foundationalism is infinite regression. It's all circular all the way through, which is why it's stupid. It's stupid to talk about, and I hate it. I hate it when Christians are like, we solve it. I'm like, no, we don't. We just have dogmatism. We just like, God exists because God does exist, and I believe that he exists. And it's like, that's also stupid sounding. Just like all foundational beliefs are stupid sounding.
So do you get rattled like when the guy started just hitting you with ad homs right away? Is that something that you have to like acclimate to, or do you like that fight? Like, how do you respond like emotionally?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with like, do you know what Y50 is? It's a, I don't know if it's a thing in America. Okay, in Alberta, Y50 is like most violent youth under 50, most top 50 violent youth. That was the group that I typically worked with in addictions and like rehab and stuff. So angry men and calling me names, I don't really care. To be honest, the only thing I get nervous about is like not presenting my side well, like doing a disservice to, in this case, feminism, even though I don't even think we debated feminism at all, but like basically making feminism look stupid. That's like the main thing I get nervous about. But I always get really nervous before debates. But like angry men don't make me upset. Honestly, like bad faithness, especially when it's like, I know that you're being bad faith, makes me really annoyed, and I need to like chill. I need to...
Don't be stupid when you're talking to me. You know, don't be a smart aleck like Jordan Peterson would say.
Yeah, he at one point he said, I was like, in a conversation, you grant norms, particularly when you agree on them, so you can talk about something. And he goes, it's a debate. Even if we agreed on norms, I would never grant them because that would be a tactical disadvantage. And I'm like, that is definitionally bad faith. You're saying, even if we agree that the sky is blue, you're going to make me prove it to you so you can win. Like, what? Like, okay, I guess we're going to talk about nothing the whole time, which is what happened. It's very annoying. Yeah.
How do you feel sort of broadly about the politics space in terms of how inviting it is to women? Like, have you noticed a change over the last like 8 years? Is it better or worse?
I come from the help field, which is very warm to women. This space, there's a lot of, it's tough. I'm very used to conservative sexism because I grew up fundamentalist Christian. Liberal sexism is a new one for me. So actually, I noticed liberal sexism more.
Hold on. We can't be sexist. That's ridiculous.
That's true.
So
do you mean to say liberal?
Is it better than 8 years? I don't know. I've been doing this for 3 years. Like, and also, it's probably worth saying, right? Like, I debate sociocultural stuff with a lot of like psychology and philosophy as like the way that I engage in these things. I don't really like you guys like listing off like, oh yeah, this politician, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, that is so out of my wheelhouse. I don't know.
That's not what we sound like.
How Pisco could just like riddle off like 8 different court case laws and all these things. I'm like, that is not my wheelhouse.
We try to sound far more parsimonious.
Your guys' chat made me believe that maybe the space isn't very warm, at least to people who don't know things. I don't know if it's a woman thing though. It's hard.
They have an anti-Canadian bias, which is unacceptable. We're working on it, which is another
We've got some snarkers. We've definitely got snarkers.
Future American bias.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to know. I haven't been in it for a long time. There's definitely more sexism here that I've experienced. Like, I'll be in meetings and my husband will be like, why are they talking to you like that? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just really annoying. And he's like, they would literally never talk to me like that. So I don't know. It's different than the help field. That's for sure.
So remind me, on your Tim Pool debate, it's a 1v1. Who are you debating again?
It's not even a debate. Like I was like, is this a debate? I gave him a list of topics for us to debate on, and American Nacho's like, let's just...
That's who it was.
American Nacho, yeah. So we're discussing why men are disillusioned with the left. And I'm like, is there going to be a debate here? Probably. They're probably all going to say some like crazy shit. But I'm sure I'll agree on a lot of things. Like, it's like, yeah, we don't really care about men's issues. I don't know if you guys heard. Do you guys know what the APA is? The American Psychological Association?
Yeah.
They just finally released a stanza specifically talking about like the intersections of masculinity in men and how you need to think about it in your therapy. And it's like, it's probably not good that it's so late that we're like thinking about like men are incarcerated more. Why does that matter? But yeah. I don't know what it'll be. We'll see. It'll be probably a slight, like a 1.5 v1 something.
Well, what do you think, for example, like the Democratic Party can do? Because obviously we bled a lot of like, especially young men. Like what do you think are some tangible steps that Democrats could take tomorrow if they wanted to address that issue?
So I went to DC to talk to Democrats about this, and I don't know how Democrats can start caring about men until they stop hating young men, right? So like I was texting the group the other day and I sent them, do you guys know George Droid, the meme?
Yes,
Okay, yeah. And I was like,
I do know the meme.
okay, George Droid is just George Floyd as a cyborg, and then they just put a bunch of like, it's crazy. It's very,
wow.
It's like a racist. It's pretty
super
racist.
It's super racist, and I'm like, this is what a lot of young men think is funny. You need to understand. You don't have to like it. I don't like it, but you need to understand like what's going on here. You need to like understand it. You need to be able to code switch. You need to know things like.
Wait, so are you a dark woke advocate?
Yeah, I think so. Dark woke being like edgy. Like
Yeah.
edgy and woke. Yeah, I think so. I think the left is very soy, genuinely. And I think a lot of young men have whether we agree with it or not, we've still socialized young men to believe that they should be masculine men who are heroes, right? Like most men grow up wanting to be action figures and soldiers and shit. Not all of them. And like the left has made a lot of space for men who aren't that way, which is good, to be clear. I think that that's really good. But the issue is we haven't made a lot of space or answers for the men who want to be.
Yeah, but you said Democrats hate young men, Kyla. I mean, that's an exaggeration, right? I mean, do they really hate
be right back,
young men? What's the evidence for that?
I think the fact that like they can't even begin to talk about issues that directly affect young men without like caveating it with like 8 million caveats and then also ending it with being like, but women are struggling too. And it's like you wouldn't do that with any other group, like ever.
I feel like oftentimes the needs of young men I feel like are overstated. And I do agree that there's a failure to appeal to young men. I think that's true for sure. But
I think
this like lack of go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You can finish.
No, you go.
I was going to say, if you look at young men and the stats that they have, I don't know if you know much about intergenerational research, but typically when a group has gone through intergenerational trauma, some of the sequelae markers of that is going to be high levels of suicide, high levels of addiction, and high levels of like homelessness and achieving lesser education. And increasingly, we are seeing young men occupy these stats at a disproportionate level than they have in the past, which I think is really concerning. And I think when you talk about this on the Democrat side, they just want to couch it in a lot of caveated language. And it's just like, there are issues that women are facing, unquestionably. I have been debating pro-feminist positions for the last like month and a half, right? I'm not denying any of that. But when we talk about young women's issues, we don't need to caveat by being like, well, yeah, but like young men are dying at a higher rate from suicide. We don't need
would you
to
say
caveat.
Democrats? Would you say Democrats are, hate women? I mean, there's you notice that there's a lot of like, yeah. So I guess
I think they
I don't
respect
know.
women. I don't think
I
they
do.
respect men.
But we already talked about that.
Yeah, I don't think they respect men.
I agree. I agree. There's probably like some people like the party isn't doing enough maybe to curry the favor of young men, and I do agree. Probably young men face particular issues.
I think they dislike young men.
But to characterize it hatred,
Well, dislike, right?
that's a strong word.
But yeah, but hatred is just like they dislike it, right? I think.
Oh, but
if
I
they
don't.
spent time in a working class area with a bunch of young men, they would not like them because they're not very likable people. I don't like them very much, right? I just have high empathy for them, right? They're going to be rude. They're going to be probably self-pitying. There's going to be a whole bunch of behaviors we don't like, but also they're going to have like some interest in some level of like violence. They'll probably think that like certain things that we think are offensive are funny. There's going to be a whole bunch of ways that they exist and perform that we won't like. Just
Sure, but they're
fundamentally,
not
it's not
going out of the
allowed
way.
on the left.
They're not. Do you feel? I guess I'll ask this as a question as opposed to a statement, since I'm not as well steeped in the research as you are. But do you feel that the Democratic Party is actively going out of its way to antagonize young men, or that it's more of this kind of neglect, lack of concern?
So I think there's a lot of
So I'll give you the comparison. Sorry for interrupting. But like comparison is a lot of people will think that Republicans go out of their way to fuck with women. And that's where they get the whole meme of like Republicans hate women, is because they go out of their way to antagonize women. Do you see that parallel in young men for the Democrats? I guess I'll ask you.
I think to some degree, I just think it's more systemic than it is systematic, right? I don't think that like Democrats are like being like, man, how can we fuck young men over this year? Like, I'm so excited. Where are the white ones at? Like, go get them, boys. Go me to them or something. I don't think that that's happening. I think what's happened, though, is a cultural shift in preference for things that are not traditionally masculine for a bunch of reasons a lot of them good reasons, right? I'm not opposed to the waves of feminism. The issue is that in the state of that, we haven't really answered the question of masculinity. We haven't created a script that's okay with it, and we've kind of denied some things that seem to consistently emerge within masculinity that we just don't like and don't want to have an answer to, like aggression. We don't really want to talk and think about it when it is just kind of a more emergent masculine thing that can be honed in good ways, like assertiveness, right? And protectiveness, and can be honed in bad ways, like crime and violence and abuse. And I think that there's this general distaste towards masculine things in the left that doesn't exist towards like feminine things. I think generally feminine things are viewed as like neutral. Some of them are positive. And the things that are masculine that the left likes, we say that's not masculine. We just kind of like leave it as like agendered, but then also get really mad at women on the left when they act in those more masculine traditional ways.
Isn't it a problem of efficiency at the end of the day? Like Pisco, like when we look at the rate of young men that moved away from Democrats, would you say that is like, would you say that represents a failure of the Democrats on some level?
I think it might. I want to cabin this, and I do want to hear your take on it, Hutch, by saying I think that some of the reason that, for example, Trump appeals to young men are things we don't want to emulate, right? There are some tendencies among Trump, the bravado, the unwilling to stand up, the kind of brashness that, I can see why that appeals to young men more. And I can see that there's a need for Democrats to appeal to young men, but I don't want to emulate some of the worst characteristics there that might appeal to young men, namely the kind of like Trump, fuck it all, burn it all down, fuck them all to death attitude. I think that if appealing to young men means becoming more Trump-like, and I'm not saying that that's what Kyla is suggesting, and maybe Kyla has a more nuanced way or a targeted way to deal with some of those issues from the Democrats' perspective, but I'm concerned about turning our party into what appeals to young men because or singularly focusing on a way that sacrifices the policy, because I know that oftentimes what appeals to young men is fucked up. But I'll let you sorry, take that wherever you want to go, Hutch.
No, I don't presume to. I mean, I feel like Kyla, you're probably way more qualified to get into like incentive structures because I think it's a question of like, do you want to emulate Trump or do you want to present like a better alternative, like a more appealing alternative? And I think that's a really difficult question to answer. I don't know what the answer to that question. I'm fucking 41 years old. I never leave my apartment. I don't plan to have my finger on the pulse of the culture. But yeah, I'm curious what you think, Kyla, in terms of like specific strategy.
Okay, so let's go really like specific and granular. Okay, let's think about the campaigns that the Democrats have done to try to reach young men. Are you familiar with any of them? Like there's the Unfuck America tour. There's been a bunch of different kind of programs, Win the Fight. There's been a bunch of these different things to try to appeal to young men. And who are the content creators that they typically bring out for these events? Do you have any
Twinks.
The dean.
Well, not just twinks.
He says
They
behind the
bring out
pride
Dean
flag.
Withers, which is fine in and of itself. He's a handsome.
Look,
young
the pride
guy.
flag's there, but I'm not a twink, to be fair. Okay,
No, you're an otter, right?
more otterish and bearish, personally. I'm sorry. Anyway, go on, Kyla.
Yeah, the real issue here is who's the audience that listens to Dean Withers? This is not fucking men. Dean Withers has at least a 70% female audience. I'm promising you that. Yes.
Oh, I'm sure that's right.
In fact, I can't tell you that I know, but I know with strong belief that it is upwards of 65%. That is.
I think
female.
you're
I'd
right.
be shocked if that was true.
I think you're right.
I'm absolutely right because I was on a meeting about it like all week about this because
Who
keeps hiring
there,
these people. Yeah, sorry.
Are there people? No, I was just going to say on that score, are there people in this space, content creators that have, a 50-50 audience or a male-leaning audience that might be like good advocates?
Hutch, what's your audience breakdown, if I can ask?
Probably like 90% guys, probably.
Yeah, me too. I'm about 85% men. Conaboy, Pisco. Pisco, do you know what your gender breakdown is?
It's probably like 93, 94.
Same thing, like 90+%. And then of the, like, to be honest, like of the women in my audience, a really large minority of them are trans women, right? So, and that seems to be pretty consistent with a lot of the people in the online politics space that, like if you go to discords, for instance, like of all the women in my Discord, a very disproportionate number of them are trans women for one reason or another. So
right, because I think this is a socialization process. I've talked about this with a lot of trans women. When girls are socialized, there still is this energy. There's been a lot of great things that have been done for us, but keep sweet is still kind of a thing, even on the left, right? This is why when a pretty woman is mean to a man, even if he's a liberal man, he might make it his entire fucking life to destroy her by calling her colleges, right? That's been my life. Who hates me the most? Leftist men. Leftist men are the most aggressive men, bar none. They're the most misogynistic towards me, no question about it, right? And so it's really important when we look at the Dean Withers, because I don't have a problem with Dean Withers, and we look at the Hutches, and we go, what's different here? Why do young men want to watch Hutch and don't want to watch Dean Withers? And I want to be clear. I'm going to talk about masculinity and femininity. I'm not commenting on it being good or bad. I think cultures have femininities and masculinities that emerge. And what's important is to be honest about what our masculinity is and how we work within that. Because the Democrat answer has been, I don't like it, let's just change it. Rather than saying, we'll meet you where you are, here are some better alternatives. Here's a really good example. When you look at young children, there's two ways that they will manage their distress. There's internalizing and externalizing expressions. This is something that we actually use as a way to measure like mental functioning in young children. I'm sure you can guess it, between young boys and young girls, and I'm not saying why, I don't care why, to be honest. Between young boys and young girls, who do you think internalizes more and who externalizes more?
The guys are obviously going to externalize more by a huge margin.
Obviously, right? They're gonna throw trucks, they're gonna scream, they're gonna have a stupid fucking tantrum, whereas a girl is gonna cry, right? They knock over their toy set, the boy might kick it over and start throwing things and might like turn on his sister because maybe she's the one that helped knock it over. The girl's gonna cry. 60% of the time, maybe 70% of the time. It's not all men, not all girls, but this is generally a thing that we see. What do we do to the young externalizing boy? We say, go to your room. You're in trouble. It's bad. Your distress is bad. You're going to be alone. Deal with it by yourself. And then the young boy turns 20 and we're like, what the heck? Young men don't have any emotional regulation skills. Do you know how you teach children to regulate? You co-regulate. So the young girl cries, you put her up against your chest, her heart feels your heart, she feels your diaphragm expanding. It's all very parasympathetic. It's all very body up shit. This is how we build our brains for this stuff. And we've been building boys' brains to be dysfunctional at this, right? This is just unquestionable. And then all we do is we tell young men, go get therapy. Well, the third wave of therapy, and especially the fourth wave of therapy, is a very internalized, focused type of therapy. It's all talking about it and expressing your feelings. And we know that young incels go to therapy more than the average population member, right? They go more than Gen Pop. They go, I think, 20% more often. So incels are going to therapy more than everyone else, and
Wow.
they have a 10% success rate. Whereas Gen Pop has an 80% success rate, right? And so then we look at this and we go, and this is what psychology is doing, is going, we're fucking up. And one of the answers is we probably need to find ways to do therapy in an externalizing way, right? So there's like really stupid sounding programs where like you go outside and like build a shed and talk about your feelings. I'm not even joking. And you might be like, that's stupid. I don't give a fuck if it works. I don't give a, I'm pretty pragmatic, right? And so when you look at Democrats and when they're looking at young men, what they're offering them is you're bad because you're externalizing, which is true. They are externalizing toxically. I'll just totally grant you. Being racist and yelling at women and telling them that they're sluts and whores through your whatever chat is all bad ways to manage the fact that you feel rejected, you feel lonely, and you feel like you don't own up because you're a virgin at 21. That's not the right way to handle it, but the left says you're despicable, and that's it, right? And so it's like, yeah, does the left hate young men? Not in like, they would never say it. They'd be like, of course we love young men, but functionally, they're not doing anything. They offer young men nothing. And the reality is that most of these consultants come to me and they go, how do we convince young men that we care about them? And I'm like, care about them? What do you mean? Just care about them. And the reality is that they're doing the same thing that they've been doing to the Black community, which is that they go, how do we convince Black people that we care about them? And it's like, I don't know, care about them. Pass policies that help them. That's what you should do. But they don't want to do this, right? And the fact that they're like performing in this way is gross. And so young men.
Do you think it's
are kind of
policy?
sick.
So can you give me some thoughts on this? And thank you for that take.
Yeah, sorry for
But,
going off on my soapbox.
No,
no. I
we asked the
appreciate that.
question.
Because I saw in my chat people like, guys, this is, or to me, because I was kind of being a little bit like, what are we talking about? How do in what ways can we improve? Some people say it is a policy thing. What are the policies that the young men are crying out for? What policies can the Democrats put in place that will substantively appeal to the young men? You know, I kind of think in a similar vein to Zaya with respect to like the Teamsters. Is it going to be a case of, well, we're doing these policies that will benefit young men, but we're not going to see the fruits of it? But so what do you see as kind of some actual substantive things that the Democrats, if they had the power to, could pass to improve, the material conditions of the lives of the young men?
We codify arranged marriages, obviously.
Yeah,
Would be a good start.
true. Yeah, forced girlfriends. No, I think it's a good question. At a policy level, I don't know if I have a granular policy. What I would say is like what political institutions can do though is things like grants for NGOs and like nonprofits, right? So typically male-oriented nonprofit groups are villainized in social media as being hateful to women. Sometimes they are. Usually they're not. Usually they're just being like, how to be a man, like healthier alternatives to masculinity. You should fund these, which by the way, they don't, and they don't want to. As somebody who has been talking to funders who want to specifically target young men, I will tell you right now, unquestionably, they're like, well, we want to target young men. And I'm like, you should support these content creators. And they're like, yeah, but they say retard. And I'm like, yeah, they do.
Wait, so we're talking about, can I pause real quick? So are we talking about content creators or NGOs? And are we talking about funding NGOs or initiatives that are specifically targeted to young men? Yep. Or are we talking about, okay, got it. Because I was going to say, well, look at what Trump is doing, right? Trump is cutting funding for all different types of things. And no one seems to give a fuck in terms of that. Like, you know, who cares? How does it affect them?
At a policy level of like working class stuff, there's probably some things like certain rights that probably men could use to help bolster them in like working class roles. There might be some movement for like equal reproductive rights. So essentially like financial abortions, like where men can opt out of children more or less. I don't think there'll be any steam for that. But that would be giving equal reproductive, it wouldn't because women don't have abortion rights. But if you gave women abortion rights, this might be something that could come along with it that men would support. So there's like certain policies I'd be open to. But honestly, at this point, all I want is for our rhetoric to change and for like our acceptance of like NGOs and supports and stuff like that.
Yeah, it seems to me that the political remedy is maybe less important than the cultural remedy. Like, I don't know how much of this is a policy. I don't know how many men moved towards Trump because they liked his policies. Like, I feel like a lot of them moved towards Trump because he sort of presented to them a model of masculinity that for whatever reason was appealing to them. I mean, when I was 10, maybe I would have thought that Trump was appealing, right? Like
that's one that I was keeping in the chamber to ask Kyla. So this is actually a really good springboard here. So based on, you know, your background in psychology and also your involvement with politics in the past couple of years, what's the appeal of Trump? Because I think it would be, you may not agree with this, but I think just kind of like surveying the gender, you know, disparity among, liberals versus, conservatives and seeing the Trump presentation of masculinity, a lot of people would interpret that as cruelty and a license towards cruelty. And so how would you advise liberals to try to provide a counterweight to that? Should we be crueler? Should there be, is it just edginess without the cruelty? Because that's where I'm kind of confused about, like, what is it that Trump offers? And what would you like to see Democrats emulate?
So I think you're hitting on something really important, which is that part of what Trump offers is something we don't want to emulate, because I think we all agree that it's bad. We don't want that. So what we have to do is like distill it a little bit further down and be like, are there some principles here we can grab and kind of do away with all the bullshit on top? So my thought would be things like make people and men particularly a little bit more cancel proof, right? We need to be probably a little bit more cautious on the left about how we treat people who are on like the edges and fringes of what we think is like socially polite society. Because I think particularly a lot of young, low income working class men don't fuck with like polite society because they can't even access it, right? They don't even know how to code switch into it. And I think on the left, there really is this expectation that you can engage in that, and a lot of young men just can't, right? And so I don't know if I'm answering your question directly. I'm realizing I'm yapping and maybe not answering. Am I answering your question?
Well, if I could critique that a little bit, I feel like cancel culture is something that is described as like a left-wing phenomenon. I just feel like I totally reject that. Like I feel like both sides equally.
It's whoever's in power phenomenon is what it is. Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Because the right's doing it now, like aggressively, right? Like the right was being like, man, remember when humor could be cool? And now they're like freaking out over like edgy jokes against like politicians that they like, right? So it's like, it's whoever feels like they have the cultural clout is who's canceling. It's just that the left was doing it first on social media because the left owns social media, and social media is so new, especially to the Gen Pop, right? Us interneters are like, not, the internet's been around for a long time. For the Gen Pop, where internet is really infusing into our lives in a pretty like actionable way, it's probably like a decade old, maybe a decade and a half, right? So it's a pretty new thing. And the left was winning because it was owned by the left. The inventors of it are left. They're a little bit more educated, which is fine. And then they abuse their power by being canceling, but the right's doing the same shit. So when I'm talking about like cancel proofing, what I'm saying is that like, I think it's really dangerous, like the Dean Parker, Harry Sisson situation. I think when you look at that to me is very concerning, right? I think there's got to be a way where we look at Harry Sisson and we're like, hey, maybe don't be like a fuck boy while also like talking a lot about like feminist stuff. Like it doesn't really make sense. Like I agree that there is criticism for Harry in this. I don't know if it's burn the bridge, destroy him, never work with him ever again. And there has to be lines, because there are some things that people do that you have to say, this, I can't work with this person. And I think that that's fine. But I think that the lines that we have for that are a little bit too narrow right now. And we need to have honest conversations about what that is, and also be like willing to engage with people at a practical level that we might not agree with at every single level. Because if we agree 90% and we disagree 5%, but the 5% makes us not work with each other, I think that's very non-functional. And I think for a lot of young, poor men, they'll never be able, even if they don't get canceled, they'll never be accepted in these like more left-leaning spaces because they can't do the language of it.
Well, you brought up social media, and I think that introduces just a whole new factor into the equation that is just kind of difficult to reckon with. This incentive structure that creators have towards audience capture is, I mean, there is a literal, in many of these cases, extremely lucrative incentive to become audience captured. And in the case of like Dean, did he cut ties with Harry because he literally thought that Harry had done this unforgivable thing? Or did he cut ties because he anticipated that his audience would rip him to shreds if he didn't? And so that like creates a cultural problem, because you have these creators that these young people look to as like a model for how to engage in politics. But the whole kind of like system is perverse and a bit corrupted.
And nobody knows that.
So, that's a difficult thing to address, really.
So one thing I think is really important when we're talking about canceling that I probably didn't mention is like, we're thinking about content creators because we're all content creators, but people get like canceled from their friend groups in like dominantly left-wing metropolitan cities all the time. There are tons of people I meet all the time that just become like slightly more lib. They're not leftists anymore. They're just liberal. And they get cut out of friend groups entirely, right? And we're really not seeing this on the right, right? Like I recently went to like a church group, and every single woman there was like anti-vax. And I was like, I just want to be clear, I disagree with all of you vehemently, right? Like I was pretty open about it. And they're like, well, that's not very good. But I was cool to hang out. I was cool to still chill. They would still let me have cookies, and they still invited me out to like spend time with me after. And so we're not really seeing this in like right friendship groups, but we are seeing this on left friendship groups. And I think the most often victim of this is young men, because I think young men are more rebellious. They're a little bit more antisocial. They're more likely to push on the edges of things. And so it's a hard thing to identify, an even harder thing to legislate on, but I think it's very real, and I think young men are feeling it.
I think some of the things that you pointed out, like I'll just say that I recognize, like I take your point about that there's been a relative silence. We're starting to see like some progress there. Scott Galloway's making the rounds, and I've heard Congressman Ro Khanna talk about it more, about the issues that young men are experiencing. I take your point there. I also take your point about the permission structure of like edgy jokes in right-wing circles, and there's not really, you know, a symmetry in the liberal or democratic space with that. Like, I think these are like concrete examples that I would totally agree with. I also feel like maybe it's because I haven't thought about it like in depth. It's just so much of this is like nebulous. Maybe we just don't have the answer yet. And maybe it goes back to, you know, if everything you said is true about like the general development of young men at a young age, maybe so much of this has to do with that. And it sets them, I don't want to say in an inevitable path, but it's going to skew towards, you know, a Trumpian figure, because these things like manifest in cruelty and you know, misogyny, not in every instance, and so it kind of like it kind of skews in that direction, and so maybe this has to be like a more, you know, expansive project overall. I'm interested to see like moving forward in future campaigns what politicians can do rhetoric wise. Because I think the policy is like, I think generally speaking, young men and just really people in general benefit under Democratic administrations as a general proposition at the state and federal level. But then I also look at people like Tim Walz, you know, and Walz came out, Governor Walz came out and effectively said this, like that he was chosen by Vice President Harris's campaign because he could code switch and talk to, you know, these kind of stereotypically conservative people who like to wear flannel and work on trucks and watch and play football. But a lot of people also felt that he coded feminine because he was not like particularly gruff, and he was like a really sympathetic, affable guy. And so I'm curious because, you know, especially when you worked with Progressive Victory during that campaign cycle, you're obviously familiar with Governor Walz. Yeah. Let's look at him as a specific example. How did you feel that Walz did in terms of a step towards trying to appeal to young men in a way that's not Trump-like, because Walz is not cruel?
Yeah, I think he was better than we've had before. And just to be clear, I love Tim Walz. Like, I love him so much. I feel like everything I see of him, I don't know if I agree with him at every policy level, but that's not how I gauge good people at this point. He just seems like he just seems legit, like really legit. I think he really, really cares. And I think there's this sad thing that's happened, because I'd be curious how much he would appeal to young men like 10 years ago, right? Because he has like this dad high school vibe that I think a lot of millennial men can map onto and be like, I actually look up to this. I think a lot of 20-year-old men probably wouldn't map onto that very strongly, right? Especially because they've been so far captured towards the right. And so I'm not opposed to Tim Walz. I don't know if he's like the perfect Democratic answer, but I also think that putting the burden of appealing to young men on like a single individual in the Democratic Party is probably unfair, right?
Wildly unfair. Yeah.
Like Tim Walz shouldn't be expected to be the perfect macho man to pull and say. Pete Buttigieg shouldn't be either, even though he's badass and cool in a lot of ways and he's handsome, but he's also gay. So a lot of guys might be like, oh, he's cool, but he's gay, you know? So I think what really has to happen is there has to just be an acceptable cultural shift in the left party to say, what are we willing to play ball with where men are at right now? What are genuine their issues? And how do we code switch to talk to them? I think those are like just really important first steps.
One quick follow-up before Econo Boy like jumps in. Just one quick follow-up again, kind of circling back to the cruelty thing or the ruthlessness. What about a Democratic politician? Because I don't think Governor Walz was really this. He had a sense of humor. Like, he picked on Elon Musk and stuff like that. So I guess he had some edge to him. But what about an asshole? What about somebody who, like, again, and this could be totally reductive, but as somebody who covers like Trump and MAGA a lot, there's just like a lot of like naked, open cruelty, and it's increasing with each month. Like, they're not even trying to hide it. What about,
I don't think an asshole would have a lot of success in
that's why I'm curious. That's why I'd like to hear her take on that. What about a more liberal asshole who's like for example, because I don't watch a lot of like Dean and Parker when they debate, but like to the extent like the debate space is watched predominantly by young men, what about a liberal who just insults and bullies their MAGA opponents? Like, basically adopts that edge and that cruelty, but directs it specifically at the right. Do you think that could appeal to conservatives?
It could appeal to some, right?
I'm sorry, not appeal to conservatives. I apologize. My brain fog there. To young men. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Who are often conservative, right? It could. It probably would to some degree. especially if they're emasculating other men. It's just dicey because the Democrat Party doesn't want that. They would be very nervous. Well, the Democrat Party loves watching conservatives get shit on, like people shitting down.
Like I'll use Pisco. Let's use Pisco as an example, because Pisco, especially, and I think the current field is one of the most rhetorically effective and aggressive. Shut the fuck up! I should just take your ass off the stream while I'm glazing you here. But
praise me.
This is somebody, who he goes into these spaces and he takes control of the conversation, and his posture is, I'm smarter than you, I'm better versed on the law than you, I can do the Optimus Prime and Transformers 2, and I'll take you all on, and I'm better than you and superior to you in every single way. He doesn't come out and specifically say that, but that's the attitude that sometimes he emulates. And I think he backs it up really well. Do you think more aggressive posture like that could be beneficial instead of kind of the more diplomatic approach that a lot of liberals take? Like Pete Buttigieg, for example, he's obviously a very gifted rhetorician, but when he gets in debates with people, he's not an asshole. He's just really smart and diplomatic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, to me, I wouldn't be comfortable at this point limiting ourselves. I think that we should allow the people who want to be nice to try, and I think we should allow the people who want to be aggressive to try. And I think we should kind of engage with all of it in between and kind of see what sticks with people. I think Pisco is very effective, right? The issue is I can't do what Pisco does, right? When I debate, so I can't be that aggressive because I'm a woman, right? They're gonna fucking hate me if I do that. But when I'm very calm and clear and sensical, then they're like, oh, she's nice, she's cute, but also she's kind of smart. So I think what we have to do is say everyone should be trying something, because in psychology and therapy, we have this idea that not every therapist will save every person, but there is a therapist for every person, right? And what I think happened in the left is that we keep looking for the magic sauce, the Joe Rogan of the left. And it's a better question is, why didn't Joe Rogan trend toward the left? Now, some of that is because of Joe Rogan. And when I say this, I mean the spiritual emergence of Joe Rogan, not the person himself, because I think that there are very specific reasons he as a person went towards the right. But there is this migration of an audience that I think is also interesting to ask, of going, why was there no alternatives that the audience might have been interested in? I think that that's the better question. And I think there's lots of people that can answer that in different ways. I think Adam Friedland is a great example of somebody who a lot of men like because he's funny, he's silly, he's a little bit provocative as well, right? Humor can be super effective. So I don't want to limit the tactics essentially that we want to try. I just want to make it okay that people are trying these different tactics, and then beg people to be genuine in their attempt. Genuinely try to care about them voting for you. If that's what you want, genuinely care about them, and then ask them what they need, right? Because at a policy level, there's speaking with American men, there's a strategic plan the Democrat Party has. Young men are saying things like, when you ask me the question about what I hope for in the future, I'm reading a quote, I can't think of anything. There's no reason for someone to look forward to the future at this time. That's what young men are saying. And it's that's dismal. We have to have answers for this.
Yeah, go ahead, Econo Boy.
Yeah, I've been trying to get in. I really think I disagree with a lot of this. It's not that I disagree with the idea that, we should try to have at least some kind of a coherent strategy for reaching out to young men. But I feel like a lot of people, when they talk about this, I find one of the problems with the Democratic Party is almost over-engineering solutions to perceived problems with our electoral deficits. Look, at the same time that people talk about the collapse of young men supporting the Democrats, it's we're talking about going from 55% support to 50% support, right? I mean, if you just look at the exit polls, this is not that big of a deal, aggregately speaking, right? Young men only represent 6 or 7% of the election base. And when we talk about young people in general, young women are, people don't talk about the complete collapse of support that Republicans have faced from young women. For God's sakes, the average young man is a tilt conservative person, maybe 50-50. It kind of just depends on the election. The average young woman is a Kim Jong-un level supporter of the Democratic Party. It is completely ridiculous, the percentages that Democrats pull from young women. That's a really, really good thing. But you don't see,
because they care about young women issues, they do. I think they genuinely do. So they should. I
mean, I think that's a little bit misplaced. The reason I say that is because I think that when you start to peel back, what is a lot of this sort of social exclusion that young men feel? I think a lot of it comes down to these sort of broad trends in the economy over time and social movements over time. A lot of social movements have frankly been focused away from white people and like empowering other groups of people, women, minorities, gay people, this kind of thing, right? And so you can follow that through with the support the Democrats have from various individual demographic groups, right? Like in this particular election, when you look at the young men that the Democrats lost, it's very disproportionately young white men and young Hispanic men, right? And there's stories that make sense for both of those groups. Like young Hispanic people are just assimilating and sort of becoming more median American and a little bit further away from their immigrant backgrounds. That seems to have meant that they've fallen more into sort of like a conservative viewpoint that a lot of Hispanic communities have. And then young white men, you know, when you look at trends in like income and wealth accumulation over time, young white men have kind of been not left behind, but they've faced a lot of new competition in the economy, right? You know, men have to, generally speaking, compete with women in the workforce now. That's been a trend for, it kind of peaked over the last 20 years. But young white men, like people in their early 20s, they've fully grown up in that environment, right? That much more competitive environment than their parents did or their grandparents did. And that's caused wages for those people to stagnate, right? And look, I'm not saying that, you know, you can implement a socialist platform and solve all of these issues, but I think that these macro issues are, I think, broadly speaking, much more important. What can you do about societal inequality in general? That's the thing that can help a lot of these issues in general, right? Because it's,
but in order to do that, you need to
down.
But in order to do that, you need to win seats, and if you want to win seats, you have to like. I feel like you have to probably address the problem, right?
Well, there's also
you do, but I think
here. We should if the Democrat Party stands for the party of liberal values, like the reason that I like the Democrat Party is that essentially I think it abides by the values that I have as a liberal, which is about like freedom of opportunity, that we respect other people, and other people includes men, right? And so it's like when people are like, well, why aren't the Republicans worried about losing women? I don't know. I don't give a fuck. I don't care about Republicans. To be clear, they're stupid for it. They should care about women, and I think it's bad that they don't. But I'm not a Republican, and there's a reason that I'm not. On the left,
but I don't think you've demonstrated. I don't think you've demonstrated that Democrats just like don't care about men or young men, right? I mean, I think that you know, in part the reason why like a guy like Tim Walz is even the VP nominee is to try and appeal to young men, and I just don't think that. Works. Well, that's my point there, Erudite, right? Is that I think that's
my point. Is that they picked
that's my point.
Yeah, right. They picked Tim.
That's
Walz.
my point, Erudite. You can't steal my point from me. Anyway, go.
But that's my point. That they thought that Tim Walz was going to be the one that appealed to these young men, and they were clearly, I think, incorrect about this. And more importantly, I guess you're saying, well, there isn't like that much evidence. There's just this one election. Maybe it'll course correct. Maybe it will. That'd be fucking awesome. I have no problem with that. The issue is twofold. Number one, part of why I care about men is because I grew up with this mentality at the at-risk youth camp I worked at, which is that if we don't reach their hearts today, they'll break our hearts tomorrow. And that is particularly true of young men. Young men do like 98% of the crime, right? They are the most violent group. They are the most likely to do addiction and abuse, right? They are a very important group to reach. Essential. Right, at a very fundamental level. But also beyond that, if this trend continues, it's a really big deal. It's a massive deal. And we should be concerned about it, especially when we have Trump like less and less meme posting about a third term, right? We need to be concerned about this. And so I'm not saying everyone has to care about young men, but I am saying we need to make space for caring about young men, and you definitely shouldn't be shouting me down when I say that it is. Like, even if you look at like the comments that will probably be coming from this and some of the hatred that I'll be getting, which I'm also getting support. My position isn't don't care about women. It's just let's also care about young men. Let's figure out what they want.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Well, but they're not. This is the issue. These are not zero-sum games. Me advocating for young men doesn't mean that I hate women. And it shouldn't mean that, but it has become that, and that's harmful. And it's become that from both sides. There's not blame to fall on just women or just men, but the reality is that people shouldn't be so enraged when I say, yeah, I don't think Democrats are appealing to young men. I don't think that they like them, and I think that in a functional way. I don't really care if somebody says, Kyla, I really like you, and then they treat me like shit at all times. I'm like, I don't know. But functionally,
Kyla,
you
that's
don't
not
like
true,
me.
though, right? I don't think Democrats have this is the thing that maybe Pisca, I don't know if we have a different view on this, but I don't think Democrats have demonstrated that they think of men as pieces of shit, right? Like, I think that what you have are a lot of broad cultural trends that are, complicated. There's a huge confluence of factors, social media alienation, economic alienation that I've talked about that drives a lot of those trends. And we could certainly say that the Democrats have had kind of a blind spot for the needs and desires of young men. But I mean, to couch it in the rhetoric of like, Democrats have demonstrated that they hate young men. It's like, well, no, that's playing into the conservative bullshit talking point, I should say, that Democrats hate young men. And it's like, that's just not true. For instance, and here's a piece of evidence that I'll present. We've been having this conversation within Democratic spaces for several months now, right? Like, we've seen a lot of politicians come out and say, look, we need to appeal to young men. It is an important thing. It's on the margin important. It can make the difference between winning and losing. They started going on all these, you've seen like a lot of politicians start to go on all these alternative media spaces to try and directly appeal to them. I've seen no criticism from Democrats or Democratic insiders for people like Pete Buttigieg going on, the Andrew Schultz show or whatever. Like,
Or Bernie
it's
Sanders,
been universal acclaim, right?
Yeah,
like
now.
It took cratering for that to happen.
But it's
cratering,
there was
That's the
no
question.
crater, right?
I
There's no
understand.
crater.
It took losing ground for that to happen. I mean, like, surely you would agree that if Democrats did a lot better with young men, that could have been the difference between winning and losing, right?
But if what Erudite is saying is right, which is that Democrats hate men and they hate the attempt to appeal to them, you would absolutely see a shitload of criticism from insider Democrats for other Democrats doing that. We don't see that, right? I mean, I think it's fair to say there was a blind spot, but I don't think it's fair to essentially agree with this radical Republican line of.
Well, can we get her to
and I'm not
clarify?
saying-
Let's get to clarify.
Sure.
Let's get some potential clarification. So, Kyla, is it your position that the Democratic Party collectively, I won't use the word hate, but doesn't like or is indifferent to men, or that is the perception that the Democrats have done little to thwart? To me, there's a subtle but profound difference there. That Democrats actively dislike men, or that Democrats have allowed that perception to fester?
I think that Democrats dislike masculinity, and dislike is hate, right? That's like, these words are basically synonymous. So hate is probably more punchy than people like. That's fine, right? Just like Republicans would never say, we don't hate black people. We just don't like them that much, right? We just don't like the culture that they have. We don't hate them. We just don't like the crime and stuff like that. So sure, okay, they dislike.
Yeah, but in that case, right? In that case, you can point to maybe some tangible policies or some legislation or statements made by Republicans with vis-a-vis black people, or indeed of women. Do you remember? This is a deep cut, so I'm sure Erudite, you may not remember this because it's also maybe going over some people's heads in America. There was was it the former senator from Wisconsin or someone from Wisconsin maybe, who said that when women are raped, their body has a way of flushing
Todd
out.
Aiken.
Oh,
That was
yeah.
in
Was
Missouri.
it Todd Aiken? Yeah.
2012.
And even recently, right? Like, I feel like there's a lot of statements that you can point to, actual statements that show that Republicans fucking hate women, and even a lot of Democrats, I think, fucking hate women. I'm not seeing the same shit, and maybe that's my bias. Maybe it's my bias because although I watch America First to see what Nick Fuentes is talking about, I watch a lot of the content these people watch, and so I feel like I'm adequately socializing myself. But in terms of like your mainstream Democrat, if anything, I think maybe it's some lack of or just like not being aware of some of these issues. But I don't know if you can say it's a genuine dislike. And to the extent that it's a dislike, or to the extent that they're not speaking to these issues, sometimes I think that's because they're being more civil in a way that I think is respectable. Like, we shouldn't be denigrating the way that Trump is. We shouldn't be off the cuff like Trump is, regardless of, because it's just not the right thing to do. And so I don't know. Maybe there are some concrete
But we
things,
should be
and
fierce
surely.
like you are, right? We should be fierce like you
Thank
are.
you.
No, I mean it.
Yeah, no, I
There should
I
be
think I mean
space
it's.
on the left. And I bet you there's a lot of people on the left that think that you're a little too mean and too rude, right? And don't like it. And it's not really okay in polite society, right? So, like, I'll be the first to say, I think Republicans hate women and black people a lot more than I think Democrats hate men, right? I think that's obvious in every single way, right? I wouldn't even begin to push on this. And when I say hate, I just mean a passionate dislike, right? And I'm talking of masculinity, right? So if I like plucked a random man out of the crowd and I asked Rokana, do you hate him? Rokana would be like, no. And Rokana isn't going to move for a bunch of specific policies that are going to harm that young individual man. The issue is that Democrats, I would argue, would be happy if the quintessential young male experience was fundamentally erased. They don't want to talk about incels, right? They don't want to talk about how there's no safe alternative for externalization at all. They want to talk about how it's bad. It's always just bad, right? Because we've never taught people to have healthy forms of externalization. In fact, we barely even promote the gym, even though that's the healthiest form of externalization we can give men to work off their feelings, is going to the gym, right? And so I think there very much is this idea that there is a pressure amongst lots of left spaces that is angled against masculinity in the way that it quintessentially appears, not always, right? Young boys get in trouble for being more violent, even if they're not necessarily doing something bad. They're not allowed to roughhouse play, right? There's all these things that are bad and they're not allowed to do. And we see this for young men in left-leaning institutions on repeat over and over and over again. And I think what we're telling young men is, we don't like masculinity. We don't like it at all, right? In many ways, we fear it, especially women. And I think that there's good reason that we fear it. The issue is that that can't turn into dislike, and I think that it has.
What if we compare this to like the dynamics of a relationship and navigating conflict in a relationship? So how many of us have been in a situation where your partner expresses that they got their feelings hurt over something you said, and your impulse in that moment is to say, oh, I didn't mean it that way. You took it all wrong. Like we've all probably done that at one point or another. And then the longer you're in a relationship and you learn to communicate, over time you start to realize that it doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't really matter if the thing is like true or false. What actually matters is just the feeling that your partner is having, and they want to feel supported and seen and heard and acknowledged in that moment. And if you can just do that and not focus on like trying to logic your way through it, then oftentimes you can get to a place of reconciliation a lot faster. So like, what if like Econoboy, your critique is valid, where like you're sort of questioning like how much of this anti-masculine bias is actually present in Democratic circles, but what if that doesn't really matter? Like if we have a situation where a lot of young men are saying that they feel like the Democratic Party hates men, how much are we going to get from saying, well, no, that's just not true? And how much more would we get if we just attack the problem like we would a relationship? You know, like,
I think that the issue is that if incels are not created in the way that Erudite is saying, then they will not be destroyed with the solvency that Erudite is presenting, right?
What incels are created, just to be very clear.
Well,
I'm not talking about
we're just
incels.
You mentioned incels.
Well, incels
I thought I
are
heard
group
you.
than young men. We're talking about young men. I think incels are like a subgroup of young men, like a subgroup of a subgroup.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think generally speaking, we're talking about the sort of rightward shift amongst young men. I think generally, and you used incel for a shorthand. I mean, I'm just using the same thing. But obviously, we're just talking about the general shift towards the right of Republicans or of young men into being a little bit more conservative, right? Now, I've made a lot of arguments in that regard, right? I've said, number one, right, that this isn't actually that big of a shift. Number two, I think what I haven't mentioned is that this election was compositionally different from 2020, that, you know, we had millions and millions of Biden voters just decide not to vote, right? And when you look at the poll that I was able to review, the one poll that I've seen in that regard, it didn't seem like this was a group of like conservative or like tilting right people who were deciding not to vote. This was like a more liberal group of people, more left-wing group of people, right? And so, you know, when you look at a poll, for instance, that says like, oh, like young men shifted to the right by 6 points. Well, we have to keep in mind so many, like, you know, hundreds of thousands or perhaps millions of young men just decided not to vote, right? And so that's a bit of a different, that would just change how you would address that issue. And I don't think that I don't think there's a lot of great evidence to point to the idea that the reason why young men of the ones who've shifted to be more conservative, the reason that they've shifted to be more conservative is because they feel like Democrats have like left them behind as a demographic group. Because when you poll young men, and like my experience talking to young men who have shifted to the right, they pretty much say the same issues that a lot of people who voted for Trump say. They said, oh, I thought inflation was a big problem. Oh, I thought that the border was a big problem, right? I mean, and so really reduce this down, right, and we think about like the exact kind of person that Erudite is talking about, right? A young man who decided to vote conservative, or maybe decided to not vote in general because they feel like the Democrats have left behind their demographic group. That's just such a small group of people, right? And I do worry about over calibrating on this issue, because we do want to maintain our gains with young women.
I feel
we should be, we should be worried, I think, about over calibrating our solvency in that regard, because the reality, and I think the data does prove this, this is a very small group of people, even amongst young men.
I'm looking at the numbers here, and I don't think you're right, man. Like we went from.
Do you think that the institutions are solid, like the research institutions, like the DNC research institutions and whatnot? Do you think that you broadly trust their research and stuff? Do you think that like the people who are in political staffing and stuff, do you think that essentially the institutions is still on the left filled by competent, capable, thoughtful, informed people? I'm assuming you believe that?
Well, I guess it depends on what you mean. I think I have a lot of criticisms for the institutional knowledge of the Democratic Party. It seems like that's what we're talking about, is that they've really missed a step here. And I would agree that, look, we lost.
The Democratic Party is just wrong here. There's multi-million-dollar studies going into this. Every politician agrees that this is an issue. Most think tanks agree that this is an issue. Everyone's putting their money into this as an issue, but you think they're all just wrong.
Well, okay, but Erudite, you have to, there's two different kind of arguments being made here, right? There's the argument that, oh, we've lost young men, right? And we've lost a margin of them. That is in dispute. You can just look at the data, right? There's no arguing that this is a huge problem. It's not. We didn't collapse or crater with young men.
Hold on. We should unpack that, because I'm looking over the last 10 years that went from Gen Z men went from 24% affiliated with the Republican Party to 45%.
And what was the Democratic?
But that's not a marginal shift.
Well, no. You have to look at how many of them are affiliated with Democrats and what their actual voting behavior is, right? Because a lot of people will register, but they won't actually vote. So, look, I suppose to some extent I do care about people who don't vote, obviously, but we're talking about winning elections here, right? And when you look at the exit polls and you look at the analyses that are done of people that actually voted, you do see a rightward shift amongst young men. And it's a very disproportionate shift amongst Hispanic men and white men, right? And we have to think about, like, what are the reasons why that happened, right? And I think that a lot of the reason why that happened is because of, like I said, these long-term trends in cultural and economic alienation that affects a lot more people than just young men, obviously. But then also it's going to be in part, like we see, for instance, a huge spike in the gender gap between 2016, 20, and 2024, which a lot of people have said that's just because we nominated women in those years, right? And I have a hard time disagreeing with that, look, we nominated women, and so the gender gap spiked. I mean, I don't think that's a coincidence, right? 2024 was not unusual in that regard either. And, I just think that we, again, risk over-calibrating, and we risk alienating other parts of the base, right? Like, we know that the Democratic base fundamentally is a base that can win elections.
Like, why would saying male issues matter too be alienating?
Well, no. I'm not saying that it would necessarily alienate other parts of the base, right? I'm just arguing for caution in this regard. That I think that a lot of the times you see Democrats and you see Democratic consultants who they say, this is my theory of the election, right? This is how we won. This is how we lost. And it ends up being a hyper focus on issues that are not exactly touching grass. And it ends up, we end up missing the mark and potentially hurting ourselves. And I think that when it comes to what you're saying, Erudite specifically, one of the reasons we lost young men is essentially because of this like perception that Democrats just don't care about, at the very least, or at the most, they hate young men. I'm just saying that it seems like when you poll young men, right, and you ask them, like, why did you vote for who you voted for? That's just not what they're saying, right? And so if that's not what they're saying, then,
so you think it's like economics and housing crisis and stuff, I'm assuming, is what you think like caused the right shift of men?
Yeah, it's a lot of broad trends, I would say.
So why is it
and those are hard to pick.
Affecting men?
Well, I mentioned before that I think that a lot of these broad trends have been to the benefit of women, right? So I talked about how, women's labor force participation, for instance, it peaked around the year 2000, which is when a lot of these Gen Z and millennial men were being born, right? And so a lot of these men are born into a labor market that is so much more competitive than it was than when their parents were older. And that is very much a direct, the direct reason why that is because women have entered the workplace. And so women's wages have gone up a lot over time and men's wages have essentially stagnated, right? And that's not because of Democrats hating men or any sort of like terrible policy. It's literally just because we said women should enter the workplace, right? And so if we understand that that's a big trend that causes a lot of the alienation that young men feel, well, that's pretty complicated. You know, that's a lot more complicated than just like nominating a masculine man or like speaking to men's issues. Like one of the issues they're feeling, whether they say it or not, is the fact that women are fucking competing in the workplace. And it's not as exactly clear how you would like solve that as a problem.
But women have been competing in the workplace for a lot longer than this massive shift that we've seen, right? Like, it's not like it's new that women are competing in the workplace. Women have been in the workplace and competing quite effectively. I would say at like minimum, we've got to say the 90s. I don't have the data on the top of my head, but I think women have been increasingly doing super well, which is good, by the way. I don't have any problem with that. And so I don't know why women competing in the workplace suddenly would hit us in 2024 when it didn't hit us in 2016 or 2000.
Well, I've already said though, because women's participation in the workplace, it kind of peaked in the mid 90s to early 2000s, right? Like that's when all these men were born, right? And so all of these women who were born into that labor market and all these men who were born into that labor market, they were all born around that time, right? And I don't think it's a coincidence that when you talk to a lot of college graduates who are graduating college who are men versus women, they have a lot of times very different, experiences, right? That they, a lot of young men will talk about, oh my gosh, it's ridiculously competitive. It's so fucking difficult to get a job, even if you have enough experience and all this and that. And I think that you could blame in some part, like maybe there's like DEI initiatives or something that makes it harder for men to get jobs somewhere. I mean, maybe that's tough. But particularly though, a lot of those people have experienced essentially a lifetime, particularly competitive lifetime compared to many of their parents. And I think that that's a big reason why you're seeing their wages stagnate and their relative position in society also go down by a lot. I mean, they're in a world which is much more equitable than it used to be. And that's going to have a lot of transitioning to do. There's going to be a lot of transition to do in that regard, right?
Yeah, but if it peaked in the 90s, I don't know why it's taken like 25 to 35 years.
Because they're born around that time.
I understand what you're saying. I'm saying that this is your hypothesis, right? I'm telling you, your hypothesis doesn't feel very salient to me. It's not striking. And I have to take your hypothesis against the mountains of data that the Democrat Party itself has looked into and multiple think tanks who have come to a similar conclusion that probably reaching out to young men is important. And I have to go, maybe
no, Erudite. I've never said that reaching out to young men isn't important, right? We're talking about diagnosing the way that you reach out to them, right? And what's the things that you can speak to that actually effectuates a change in the beliefs of young men, right? And I mean, maybe there's some, you said you've referenced data here. I haven't seen the data that you're talking about that says that the reason why young men are voting more conservative, tilting more conservative is because they feel like the Democrats hate them or have like substantially left them behind in a very direct demographic sense, right? I've said that, look, on this.
What the data says is that they typically cite, so I talked to the guy who ran that entire data program thing in the Blue Rose thing. And I asked him specifically, I'm super curious, how come you didn't include any of like the super cringe social justice? Because they gave a list of 40 kind of randomly selected issues as to what shifted their vote on exit polls. And nowhere on there was there any sort of social commentary thing that you could select, like really, other than DEI, which I think DEI is a red herring of the right, because I don't think DEI is a problem in any way, shape, or form. Right? I don't have a problem with like women and Black people being included, right? And overwhelmingly, we saw housing. And so when I asked the researcher, I don't want to name his name because I don't know if he wants it named. When I asked him, why didn't you include things like feeling disillusioned from the left, feeling like the left had gone too far, any like sort of like trans issues, he was like, honestly, we just didn't include it, but maybe we should have. So it's this very interesting thing where I understand the data that you're talking about, and I'm not opposed to more housing, What I'm interested in is why there's this massive rejection of what I'm saying, which is that I don't think the left cares much about men. I think that they actively dislike masculinity. I think that's evident in everything that people have been talking about since like 2016. I think this is emergent. I don't have super good data on all this because I mostly didn't come prepared to have data on this topic specifically right now. I also suspect that the research hasn't been fully done in all of these areas, but I think men are increasingly feeling disenfranchised. I think some of that is because young men don't know how to cope with a different world, right? And we haven't given them the strategies to do so. We just expect them to be better, which I don't think is really fair. We don't really expect that of any other group. And what I'm advocating for is for some way to find a way to appeal to young men, because it is obvious. It is obvious if you just look at the polls, if you just look at who's voting, look at who's watching what, that young men are increasingly not watching left-leaning stuff. And I am concerned that this trend is continuing and getting worse, not better.
Well, I am going to
just
throw... Go ahead.
Sorry, just to clarify real quick, there was I'm looking at the data right now. I've looked at a few different polls. I can link you this poll here so you guys know I'm looking at a poll, but they see a 9-point drop just between 2023 and 2024, a 9-point drop with Gen Z guys. I mean,
again, right? Like that might be registrations or like party identity, but that's not like actually voting behavior, right? So that's the only thing I'm saying. Here's what I would expect. Here's my prediction. Okay. I would predict that when we look at the exit polling data for the 2026 midterm, we're going to see a big shift to the left amongst young men, right? And look, maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe these trends will be perfectly static, right? But if my theory of composition of the electorate matters and my theory of a lot of these broad issues and macro issues matter, we would probably expect that, right? Now, and I think in 2028, that'll probably be a generally favorable year for Democrats because Trump will probably be unpopular. The next nominee for the Republicans won't have the riz that Trump has, right? I expect you'll probably see the same thing, right? And, obviously it'll take years for these theories to bore out and things can change along the way. But, I think that a lot of elections comes down to luck of the draw in terms of the macro environment. It comes to being the right person for the confluence of factors, the cultural factors of the moment, right? And I don't know that it's... I agree with Kyla that this stuff matters and you should have a strategy to reach out to young men, but it's very, very marginal, right? And I think that we should probably encourage us, and I don't even know if Kyla would disagree with this, that we should probably encourage a soft touch in this regard. Because, I think that we do risk kind of like, we do risk like gaining support amongst young men and maybe losing support amongst other people, depending on what we do, of course. Like a lot of the polling, for instance, that I saw when it came to how women evaluated Trump was they hated his brashness. Oh, one of the reasons I hate Trump is because of how brash and how you could say like hyper masculine he is, right? And a lot of people, and I'm not saying Erudite saying this, but it seems like a lot of people are like, oh, if we just had like Stephen A. Smith as a perfect, people are like, oh, Stephen A. Smith is the perfect antidote for this because he's such a masculine like sportsman. And it's like, bro, if we nominated Stephen A. Smith, we're probably sacrificing as many women who are going to vote for us as men who might additionally vote for us, right? So is this a winning exercise? Like, and again, I'm not saying that's what Erudite's saying. I think there's some nuance here that's important to inject into this conversation. So.
Yeah, I think, like, for example, if you said, when it comes to political policy, does policy making on young men issues matter more than economic issues? I would say no, like absolutely not. Economic issues and housing issues are the biggest issues facing us. Unquestionably, that is the most important thing in my mind, right? Unquestionably. So I would never be advocating for gender-specific stuff over things that globally help everyone. What I'm advocating for is saying, look, there is an issue, and waiting on just like, there is data on this and there's increasing data on this, but also as somebody who worked with the Democrats, when you go with like, so the Democrats always have a very data first policy, which sounds really nice. The issue is that it's really, really hard to tap into good data on this sort of thing. For example, it's really hard to poll people and ask them, hey, how do you feel about X thing? And know that you're getting an honest answer, right? One of the issues that the research group has is that it's really hard to ask questions when it comes to social cultural stuff and know that you're going to get like valid answers, in part because people don't necessarily want to report on it, right? In part because people don't know precisely what they think about it, and also because people are dishonest on these types of polls a lot of the time, particularly with social political stuff. There's also a lot of botting that typically happens more often with polls that include socio-political, socio-cultural stuff. So there's even worse data on it. In fact, they have like Blue Rose at least adopts at least 6 different questions that are sociocultural exclusive to basically exclude out trolls, bots, and people taking the like forms from like Uganda and other countries that aren't American, right? So there's a huge issue with like the quality of data. I would agree with that. The issue is that when we're talking about young men, I would say the red pill is huge. That's unquestionable. Men, I think, are increasingly becoming misogynistic. The dating divide is bad. They're not dating each other. They're not interacting with one another. I think that that's not good, right? The internet is radicalizing young men increasingly. And I think the trickle effect on politics is maybe lesser. It's possible that the next year they won't vote, and that's fine. And I get so frustrated because people are like, yeah, this is just vibes.
I agree with all that. What you're saying.
When it comes to things like social media, a lot of it is avant-garde vibes. You have to do your best. Why the fuck do young men listen to Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, and some of the biggest podcasts in the world? It's hard to distill it down. This is my theory. If somebody has a better theory, I'm open to it. But I think that this theory emerges consistently, which is that the left doesn't like masculinity. They would never say that they hate men. They hate masculinity, though. And they do not erect alternative scripts that young men find compelling. And you see that in the evidence basis of those who subscribe to far left-leaning and left-leaning content creators in general. The best content creators on the left that have men, young men particularly, are very masculine coded, like Pisco and Hutch and you guys, because you're aggressive debate bros. Those are the guys who get young male viewers. Though you're the only ones. I'm telling you, this is true. The Democrats can't even find content creators that have young males. They're like, who are they? And when I tell them I have like 90% young male, they're shocked. They're like, really? That's crazy.
I think we can find I think we can have common ground on that, at least that the culture and messaging stuff should improve,
and that you and I are masculine.
Yeah, we're very, very masculine. Obviously, we're very, very good. But I do think that we have too many kissless virgins, and we need to improve that somehow. And I don't know if that means getting people a better, I don't know, diet of content, or better liberal leftist creators who appeal to kissless virgins. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe
we need Democrats to support you guys. This is the thing. We need Democrats to, because I'm going to tell you right now, if I show them Pisco shit, some of them will bite because they're finally getting it. Most of them will be spooked. They will not like Pisco's content. It's too mean. They unironically think it's too mean. I'm telling you, I show them debates. I am telling you, this is what they are saying. They want to go with people who will do classic partisan talking points and not be too mean. That's what they go with every single time. And what we have to do is find a way in the culture, right? The social media level we need to win, but behind that has to be some level of political granting, because if you don't think the Daily Wire and TPU wasn't instrumental for shifting men towards the right, you're on some kind of like crazy shit. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think ironically we agree with a lot of the solutions that you talked about, right? Because I would agree that like you need a very comprehensive social media strategy, and you need a lot of these, it's good to see that the Democrats are at least like agreeing that we do need alternative media appearances in our own alternative media ecosystem. Obviously, like, if that's like, the Dean Withers, style alternative media ecosystem, or if there's more, kind of like bullish masculine figures that you could, try to get as well, then I guess that's, it'll be hard to see what they actually end up wanting to invest in. But we agree with that. Yeah, we agree with that.
Basically what you're saying is Pisco and Hutch, maybe accountable, we need to do a college tour.
That would be amazing.
I'll do a college
tour.
tour.
You guys should join Unfuck America, and do like debates at college and like follow Charlie Kirk around.
Call it Refuck America. Because unfuck is like it's collapsed. It's done, right?
Lose the just fuck America.
Yeah.
Oh, good meme. Yeah. What the? I didn't expect this to be. I think this was our most vigorous debate we've had on Live and Learn. Is that fair, Josiah?
I'm not gonna lie.
I wasn't here for Brad Palumbo.
I don't think that anything I'm saying is crazy. I see people in the chat being like, so what? Her point is just that we should like value masculinity a little bit more. Yeah, it's pretty fucking simple. I'm not saying something crazy. I'm not saying that Democrats should rewrite their entire. I'm not saying anything crazy here. It's really simple shit. The right is appealing to young men, especially at a media level. That affects voting, politics, and culture. We need to get better at it because we fucking suck right now. And part of why we suck is because we hate masculinity.
I think like the knee-jerk reaction, not to drag this out because I'm sure we want to wrap up soon, but I think like the knee-jerk reaction is like we've seen so much disingenuous sort of like pandering to young men in like really toxic ways with some of the usual cast of characters and the Andrew Tates and et cetera. And so I think there's this like impulse. I know I felt this impulse for a really long time. Like anytime anybody brought up the concern about young men, my impulse was to just be like, just to push it away. I'm telling you, that was my reaction for years. And I'm not saying like, we should be like more like Andrew Tate, but now I'm starting to get like a little bit more.
Kyle, to
furious
clarify,
about-
you are also not recommending that either,
It's a
right?
drop of Andrew Tate in every Democrat.
That's my Bugatti.
No, but I think we have a valid reason to be skeptical because like there's so many examples of grifters that are, pushing like I would say like really bad narratives about why young men are the way that they are. And so like there's this impulse to like not even want to think about it, which I understand, but I personally found your arguments to be persuasive, erudite, and I'm sure a lot of other people. I know I saw a lot of other people in chat that did as well.
This
So
debate and the chat's reaction to this conversation is my point. There are deranged reactions happening right now to saying the left doesn't like masculinity. Just be honest. We should probably get better at that and offer them a healthy alternative to masculinity that they will appeal to. Let's just do it.
Kyla,
We can do it.
as a coda real quick, I do find it telling that the Jargate situation with Andrew Wilson was so like
Erected.
impactful for people, and it really just felt like a veil was lifted off a lot of people's eyes, and the reaction has been so strong and the meme's so good because what is like a classical masculine trope of this opening of the jar, that he was at once,
It was
you know,
so
castigating
pathetic.
the woman for being able. Yeah, it was so.
Mangy fucking
yeah.
loser. And then her boyfriend opened it for him. Like, bro.
Oh, really? That's
Yes,
hilarious.
her boyfriend
That's
came up
cooked.
and popped it open for her.
it was pretty devastating. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
this
think
is
there's a video of
And
yeah.
terrifying. Social media politics is so much about, like, this is when people are like, what's the data and the facts? I'm like, we're probably not caught up because data takes a long time to do really well. That's just true. And I love data, but people don't even care, especially the right. And anyways, do you think voters right now care about data? Like, they don't give a fuck. What they want is like vibes
Will
and
we look
appeal,
back
and
on
people
this?
to appeal there and then get good policy that's data driven. That's
Will
what I
we
want.
look back on this, Kyla, in a few years and say the Jargate was a turning point for in the battle
Shows
for
the
men's,
male
for men's
fragility.
souls? Yeah.
Yeah. That'll be a
Please.
slide in the
Yeah.
high school U.S. history courses, like Jargate.
You
We'll talk
greased
about
it. You fucking greased it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's terrifying that it's all vibes and feels when it comes to social media winning. It's not good, but that is the game that we're playing right now. And so we have to be able to show up, basically. And I think you guys are doing a pretty good job.
I'm
Be more me.
somewhat. I was just gonna say, like on a kind of a, to end this on an optimistic note, it's certainly far from where it needs to be, but I am cautiously hopeful about the Democrats moving forward, because one of the things that like I've been hearing, and I mean, IRI's having conversations with Congress people. I think Hutch has had, and Pisco had, and I'm having conversations as well. They recognize that they've got to, increase their game, their social media outreach.
Rokana on this
Yeah.
pod. That's fucking crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually it's funny because while you all were talking, I saw a tweet from Rokana from like 45 minutes ago where he's on, I guess that's a clip from TYT, Pisco's favorite progressive podcast, where he's talking about, how Democrats have failed young men and stuff like that. So there's at least, they're at least paying lip service to the notion that they fucked up and they need to do better. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But listen, it was really good having you on, and it actually says something because this is by far the longest live and learn. We've lived and learned the longest, like by far. Like my boomer ass, like part of me died
Retired.
an hour ago. Yeah.
I'm gonna say top five guests, top five discussion. Yeah.
We've only
that was
had
good.
4 guests, asshole. What are you talking about? Okay.
I just like,
Kyla,
you're really great. Trust me, Kyla.
Actually,
we've-
to your point, yeah, that's probably true. But
we've
no, I
had-
mean like top 5 episode. I was gonna say.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
Yeah,
We've
I
had
mean-
at least 8 guests. So
Despite the spice, I just want you guys to know, I vehemently believe in you guys. I am going to keep pushing because I think you guys have the informed policy side, and I'm not looking for that. I already said I'm not an expert in domestic policy. Like anything I can get you guys access to, I'm gonna keep doing. I'm in touch with some tours. I'm gonna be putting your guys' names in. Like I really genuinely believe you guys. I think you guys are doing good things, and I think data-driven policy is super important. So good job.
Did you ever, and I don't know how much you can reveal about that, but that person that you were thinking about getting on whatever, do you know what I'm talking about?
It was a big, hard no. You know, Ezra Klein would have
By
liked it.
them or
it was
by...
a proceduralism failure is what it really was.
Gotcha.
Ezra Klein is like, yes.
Yeah, okay. So that
didn't
did not
happen.
pan out. Gotcha.
No.
Oh, and Econoboy wants us to shout out the Live and Learn Discord.
Yeah, throw that link on the screen, Josiah. Guys,
will.
we shouted out the Discord, and pretty much after one shout out, we were able to get like 300 something members, which is pretty awesome.
Wow.
That was several months ago. Well, it feels like it was several months ago. So guys, go to the link that Josiah is rapidly trying to get onto the screen. I'm sure.
Shut up! I am
trying his best. Okay, this is way past his bedtime.
Fuck you. Okay, listen.
No offense. You look a little
He's
sleepy.
like Joe Biden.
Sleepy Josiah.
Sleepy
Sleepy Josiah.
There's gonna
low
be a
energy.
book. There's gonna be a book called Unoriginal Sin.
Oh, you're sharing the screen.
Oh, you're booming.
You wanted me to share the screen, didn't you?
No, the message that I sent. The message that
I can't
sent.
share the screen. I can't share the screen that I'm currently on. It can't be done.
Josiah, what you do is you take that link, you post it in chat, then you share the message on screen. I'm sorry. I didn't think I needed to explain this to you, Josiah.
Listen,
I'm sorry.
Fuck you, okay?
No,
Hang on.
But guys, anyway, while he is rapidly trying to get that on the screen,
Look at
join
this
the
Live and Learn
Discord.
thing. Econoboy invited me to it. Let me put it in chat real quick.
It's a really great Discord, lots of great discussion, and I think the show has grown since then. So be sure to join our Discord if you want to hang out. All four of us are in the Discord. Maybe Hutch, are you in the Discord?
Yeah.
Okay, Hutch is in the Discord
He's in the
supposedly
Discord,
as
yeah,
well.
sure.
But look, at least the three of us are in the Discord. So
No, I'm in.
please
I just
join,
don't,
guys.
So.
Yeah, please join, guys, because we're trying to create of course, something of a live and learn community. So join
Cult.
up and
A cult, really.
That's true, a cult.
Yeah.
That's a good
King
point.
Media is in chat
who's
just says,
the-
I will not be joining.
Who's
Yeah,
the
and look, we
cult?
also have
Cult.
we do have a YouTube channel, the Live and Learn, youtube.com/@Live and Learn, where I think a lot of our VODs get actually uploaded.
All of
People
them
are
there.
like,
all of them are there.
oh,
The
you know,
money guy, you can tell he's got it fucking on the
well, because
dot.
because we
Impressive.
stream
No, it's good.
distributedly, people are like, where do we find all the VODs? You know, it's like just go to the Live and Learn YouTube
Econoboy,
channel.
I'd like you to make a targeted pitch to young men to join the Live and Learn Discord on the fly. Could you do that, please?
Okay, let's wrap this
Listen,
up, boys. I got to feed
Let's
my
wrap
cat.
it
Let's
up.
go.
In my
Kyle,
life.
where can people find you?
Yeah.
You can find me everywhere at NotSoErudite. It's spelled like how you see it on the screen. If you want to fight me, I do debates. I'm starting to try to do them 3 times a week. So yeah, and I'll be on Tim Pool on Friday talking about the same topic. So if I
Is it
get
Culture
super
War?
Angry, I'll make you angry again.
Is it Tim Pool Culture War?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's gonna be. I can't remember. Did they live stream these?
I don't know. They said
I got to go, guys. I love you.
All right.
Yeah.
See ya, buddy. Bye.
It says it's like
All
11
right.
to 1. So I don't know if that's live. I don't know. I'm just
It's live streamed.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So catch her on Tim Pool. Kyla, thank you so much. And boys, it was good chatting with you all too. And a
Thanks for
special
having
fuck you to Peace.